Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday, December 16, 2022. This is a regular meeting of the Commissioners of City of Rehoboth Beach, live in City Hall, Commissioners Room, second floor. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:01 p.m. With that, will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, I'm going to start off with the roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor commissioners, and so we are able to formally conduct business today because we do have a quorum. Thank you all for being here. I would also like to identify staff that is here that helps put this meeting together and makes the meeting. Matt Janis, Building and Licensing Supervisor. Howard Rothstein, Building Code Enforcer. City Secretary Ann Womack. Assistant or Interim City Manager Evan Miller. Glenn Mandalis, City Solicitor. Chief Keith Banks of the Police Department. Kevin Williams, Public Works Supervisor. Lynn Williams, the Communications Specialist. And also Alex Burns is an associate of Glenn Mandalis. Thank you all for being here. I think we almost outnumber the rest of the people here, but I would like to thank everybody that is here in person. I'd also like to thank you all at home that are watching this virtually. And I'd like to remind everybody that our support documents, that is documents that support individual agenda items when they are ready in advance of a meeting, are also posted online in the City of Rehoboth Beach's portal. And you can access them there so that you can generally see most everything that we see. With that, I want to make note that as far as the sequencing, the CDP, I want to make that the last major topic after JMT presentation so that they can head home, and then we'll finish up the day with the CDP discussion and anything that follows after that. With that, I want to make note that there is no correspondence received, identified. With that, we have approval of minutes. We have the minutes as noted on the agenda, executive session held on October 19th, 2022, regular meeting held on November 18th, 2022, 3 special meetings, one held on September 28th, October 19th, November 2nd, all 2022, and lastly, a 6 set of minutes to approve the workshop meeting held on December 5th, 2022. Are there any corrections that need to be made to any of the minutes?
I move adoption of the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt the set of minutes before us by Commissioner Shanowski and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving those 6 sets of minutes as noted signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion is carried to approve those 6 set of minutes. Thank you very much. With that, our next item of business is City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public. A budget report for the month of October is provided in the agenda for today. And we do have one street aid expenditure in the amount of $9,468.16 payable to Delmarva Power.
I move approval of street aid expenditure to Delmarva Power in the amount of $9,468.16.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Sharnowski and a second by Commissioner Jay Legree to authorize the city manager to pay Delmarva Power the amount of $9,468.16 for power. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And that motion is carried unanimously also. With that, we'll move right along to
Question
city.
for the city manager?
Oh, goodness gracious.
No, goodness
Thank
gracious.
you. The
It's
Vice
good to meet you.
President, Vice President, keep an eye on me here. Go ahead.
The city was copied on a letter from the Lewis Rehoboth Canal Improvement Association, noting that they are dissolving the association and that they are contributing $8,000 to the city of Rehoboth towards future maintenance of the public dock. For the next workshop, if you could let us know an updated of the complete financial status that we have and what impact that $8,000 would have on the outstanding maintenance costs that we expose to every year. Thank you.
Will do, Commissioner.
And back to you.
I do have a report.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you, Mayor. Just as a heads up, the city offices will be closed on Monday, December 26th and Monday, January 2nd due to holidays. Citywide trash collections are scheduled for December 27th and January 3rd. The city's 2023 calendars have been mailed to property owners, and additional copies are now available at City Hall for $5 each. The calendars feature 16 photos selected from the annual Rehoboth Reflections competition. And by the way, submissions for next year's competition and the 2024 calendar are already being accepted. Photographers may submit up to 3 entries via the Rehoboth Reflections webpage at cityofrehoboth.com through September 6th. The striping on Munson Street is scheduled for next Wednesday, December 21st, weather permitting. We've also ordered the speed radar signs for Munson Street, and the speed limit signs will be installed in January and driveway boxes painted in the spring. An update on the State Road pedestrian improvements. The bids for the improvements were opened yesterday, and staff is currently reviewing the bids and will bring a recommendation to the commissioners at the workshop meeting in January. Finally, an update on the Rehoboth Beach Patrol restroom facility. A contractor is scheduled to undertake soil borings on Baltimore Avenue on Wednesday, and those soil borings will aid in determining the proper design for the building foundation. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions of City Manager? If not, we'll move on. City Solicitor's report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any updates on litigation. However, because we don't have a chairperson for the Parks and Shade Tree Commission right now, you asked me to deliver a report as to their recent activity. So here it goes. Parks and Shade Tree Commission met on November 28, 2022 at 10 a.m. The members in attendance were the acting chair, Laura Ritter, Katie Downs, and 2 new members, Carolyn Diefendorfer and Renee Simonson. The commission held off until next month on approving the minutes for the meeting held on August 22nd, 2022, for the purpose of giving the commission members a chance to review those minutes. On to their business. The commission conducted administrative appeal hearing number 0922-05. Their owners of the property located at 127 Rodney Street appealed the denial of a tree removal permit application for one 15-inch diameter Zelkova tree located in the side yard setback along Rodney Street pursuant to section 253-36. That request was approved. The same property owner submitted a request to remove 2 16-inch diameter Zelkova trees in good condition from the city right-of-way adjacent to 127 Rodney Street. That request was denied. The commission heard the 2 requests related to 127 Rodney Street together. The appeal was granted as to the trees located on the private property, but the street trees are to remain. The second case they heard, it was owners of the property located at 36 Pennsylvania Avenue appealed the denial of a tree removal permit. They requested removal of 1 yellow pine tree located on city property for a driveway apron at 36 Pennsylvania Avenue. That request was approved. And the final case they heard, owner of the property located at 22 Pennsylvania Avenue requested removal of 2 locust trees located on city property between sidewalk and street at 22 Pennsylvania Avenue, and that request was denied. Finally, on December 1st, 2022, Acting Chair Laura Ritter announced that the Parks and Shade Tree Commission meeting scheduled this month for December 19 was canceled due to a lack of quorum. And then finally, the city website indicates that the next Parks and Shade Tree Commission meeting will take place on January 23rd of 2023, the new year.
All right, thank you,
That's all I have,
Glenn.
Mayor.
Thank you, Glenn. With that, we'll go to departmental reports. Note that the building and licensing report, police department, and the volunteer fire company reports are all embedded in the agenda, so we won't spend time on them today.
Mayor, I do have a question.
Yes, sir, Commissioner
For
Stranowski, go ahead.
For the code enforcement officer, under the code enforcement report, there are 71 rental license violations. That seems like a lot. What is that regarding?
Let me explain. So if if bills are taken in another office in the city and they don't go to produce the actual business license, they don't know. They can take a 2022 bill and they can, charge it, but if 2021 is still outstanding, they wouldn't know it unless they're pulling a bill. So I ran reports in November, and that's how I found a lot of 2020, not a lot. There was 71 total, but there was 1,175 rentals out there. So in the big scheme of things, it's just, it's a small percentage.
Okay.
And right now, right from that 71, there's maybe 10 or 15 that are still outstanding. But I'm getting letters and emails from executors that, people have passed away, and there's circumstances why they haven't paid.
Okay, so this was more housekeeping.
Right, exactly, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else up here? If not, we'll go to the board and commission reports, which the Board of Adjustment has submitted. You just heard the Parks and Shade Tree Commission report from Glenn, and I did not receive something from the Planning Commission. We'll kind of get on everybody's case to make sure that they supply that information in advance so we can embed it in the agenda. With that, we'll go to committee reports. No reports, no committee chairs indicated that they had substantial reports or written reports. Does anybody have anything short to say about their committees? Commissioner Legree?
I have a short verbal report for the Stormwater Utility Task Force. We met on the 6th of December and essentially just reconfirmed and tied up loose ends that we had been talking about. And we discussed the timeline. Our next meeting is going to be on the 14th of February. And at that meeting, we'll be examining the report that the consultant is going to present to the Board of Commissioners. And we'll have a chance to input that if we'd like, and then the consultant will address the Board of Commissioners with the final report sometime after the 14th of February and before the budget is adopted. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, thank you. We'll move on to liaison reports. Chamber of Commerce, I assume we'll let Carol Everhart go for it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to update you on, you remember last meeting, we talked about the H-2B bill, which is the Seasonal Employment Alliance Group. The Chamber joined that group, along with many other businesses and organizations, and we have had some more success with that. This bill was to expand both who came in under this, so was agricultural. Let's expand that to more business categories under a visa and more countries. And the other goal was to extend the time they could be here. So even if it was temporary, could the temporary be an extended time? I received notice yesterday that everything is looking extremely positive. They have some agreement on this, and it looks as though, and I like these words, the words were a temporary final rule. So a temporary final rule is what we have right now, but it does look very positive. So that would certainly assist the business community in many areas. Legislative session does begin January 10th. The main issue on that is environmental. So there is a controls of environmental is one of the big issues for the legislative session this year. In general, business is still same two problems, staffing and supplies, and it doesn't seem to matter which category you go to with that. In one way or another, it's staffing or supplies. There's been a leveling off in the real estate sales. That probably has to do with the prices, and a very inflated price right now, and of course, interest rates are rising. Short-term rentals, however, are steady, so that has not changed. And I'll go ahead and give you the accommodation counts with that. Overall, in the 19971 zip code, so the whole zip code, in Indian River Bridge, middle of that to Midway and coming in, year-to-date, last year, January 1 to the end of November, was 131,273 rented rooms on a Saturday night, 1,031,273. This year, 1,038,770. So again, just holding its own, up slightly. As far as Rehoboth goes, I did have time this time to give you that. And I'll give you just October and November in downtown Rehoboth, a comparison on a Saturday night. We'll go to week 1 of October. Last year, 83% filled. Week 1 of this year, 80% filled. Week 2 last year, second week of October, 85%. This year, 86%. Week 3 October, last year, 62%. This year, 68%. Week 4 October, last year, 95%. This year, 90%. And we go to November. The first week of November last year, 48% occupied. This year, 70%. Last year, week 2, November, 62%. This year, 58%. Last year, November, 36%. That's the third week. This year, third week, 39%. So you can see the drop. It just activities and weather just changes everything. Week 4, and this is the final week, last year, 36%. This year, 38%. So that's just downtown Rehoboth. And with that, unless you have questions for me, that's my report.
Any questions for Carol? If not, thank you very much, Carol. We appreciate you compiling that for us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to our next liaison report for the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society.
Stay tuned to the website, and they're going to close through the months of January and February.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rehoboth Beach Main Street. Ed, you got
We've
Greer.
got
Greer here.
Manival, who is, I'd like to thank Greer for her service. She is in her last week as president of the board, and she's done a great job, so thank you.
Thank you. Greer.
Thank you. Dan sends his regards that he can't be here. He is busy getting ready for tomorrow's wreath laying at Epworth Cemetery, and we hope that you all come out and join us. It's at noontime tomorrow, and it's going to be followed by a gathering back at our offices with some luncheon items and so on and so forth. So please do join us for that. Appreciate it. You know, we're really excited about all the things that we've been able to accomplish this year, and looking forward to the things that we're going to be doing in this next year. We're busy working on the budgeting process and looking to wrap that up in the next couple of weeks, and Evan, get all that to you, and to finalize our 23 event calendar, which seems to be growing by leaps and bounds. Again, the newsletter, the open rate on our newsletter is up to running around 56, 58%, which is pretty fantastic for a new newsletter. This will be the second year that we'll have that going for that. We're working on volunteer outreach. We're going to start a whole new committee to track it and build the strength. We're trying to reach out to a lot of the communities that are here on the weekends that don't necessarily live here 24/7, but that are a big part of the community and become a big part of all the events going on all year round for that. So we're busy doing that, trying to build a stronger brand so that, you know, as soon as you see the logo, you don't have to read the name. You know it immediately for those types of things. Again, I want to, since this is the end, I can't believe this is the end of my 4th year, but I want to thank all of you. It's been a great experience and something I highly recommend to do. I love the fact that you all have been involved with different events that we've been trying to sponsor and grow every year. And a great example is a community unity dinner. We had a tremendous turnout this year. It seems to just keep growing and building every year. And we appreciate everybody's help with that. We have a tremendous board of directors. They are just stellar people, and I hope that you'll take the time to get to know them because they really are a wonderful source of information for all of you. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greer.
Greer, do you have any numbers on the community unity dinner?
I know that the net that we brought in was over $8,000 in net for that. And the amount of people were, I'm going to say that there were, and forgive me, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it was well over 300 people that were there. And there was seating.
Wait a minute. We need to get to a microphone there. Thank you. No. There we go. The question was from Commissioner Legree was, do we know how many people showed up at the recent Community Unity this year?
Yep. So I'm Carolyn Diefendorfer, and I'm helping out Main Street as the assistant treasurer. There was seating for, I want to say, close to 500 people. And being there, I don't have an exact count with me, but most, if not all, the seats were taken. So I think there was well over 500, 550, something like that. There were quite a few people. Most of the tickets were sold at the door, but I think it was a great turnout, and it was good seeing a lot of you there. So thanks.
It was a nice function. Thank you very much. And you had some great servers there, didn't you? With that, we'll go to liaison for the Cape Henlopen Senior Center. That's Commissioner Chernowski.
Thank you, Mayor. An update on, as many of you know, in the next chapter of the Senior Center, they plan to build on the land that they own out on Hepron Road. Next week, the Board of Directors are going to start meeting with some consultants that do philanthropic capital campaigns. So that they'll engage with the company to help them through that process. How well that goes will start to give us a little bit of a timeline on when they might be moving out to that center. And then just a reminder that the next pancake breakfast is on January 12th.
January 12th.
And not even a ballpark on the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to the first item of old business, which is consider adoption of revisions to the City of Rehoboth Beach Design Manual for Outdoor Dining on Public Space, which was formally adopted as a policy on March 18, 2022. Such new version dated December 7th, 2022. If you recall that we've had a policy for many years, but the most recent policy was adopted earlier this year on March 18th. We let it get through the summer to see how it would go, and we performed critiques, if you will, and decided to try to make this situation more permanent, and decided to amend and update the design manual, and that's what we're addressing now. We have had meetings on that on November 7th and 18th and December 15th, and of course today. This is not a zoning matter, so there's no public hearing per se, but we do welcome input from the public and restaurateurs in a minute after we turn it over to the commissioners. The second item after this, we consider the design manual changes will be to consider the new ordinance updating Chapter 215 that codifies the design manual. Before I go to the public, would any commissioners, or would you like to define anything, or?
The only thing I'd say, Mayor, is that there were no changes from the previous version of the design manual to this version, so remains the same from our previous meeting.
So the authors on this policy are Mayor Mills, Commissioner Gossett, Matt Janis, Howard Rothstein, and Evan Miller. That really goes back to a point years ago, I think, when we started initiating a policy. And so that's kept with it, and we have had some minor input along the way, primarily in public session. So with that, again, the design manual is not something new. It has a new name on it versus policy, and embedded in the agenda is a red line version so that you can identify what the changes are, but there's also a clean version that accepts all those changes. Is there, before I go to the public, is there any comment up here? Nope. Any members of the public like to comment on the design manual, specifically the design manual being updated and amended? We'll go back to we'll ask the public for Chapter 215 in a minute. If not, we'll close the public opportunity to say anything. And I would entertain either more discussion or a motion to adopt the changes in the new design manual, version 3, dated December 7th, 2022.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the City of Rehoboth Design Manual for Outdoor Dining on Public Space, version number 3, dated December 7th.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Patrick Gossett and second by Commissioner Ed Chernowski, motioning to adopt version 3 dated December 7th, 2022 of the amendments to the design manual for outdoor dining on public space. Is there any further discussion among the commissioners? Sounds like we've had plenty of discussion before and we're ready to vote for it. If there's not unanimity, then I'll go back and do a roll call vote, but otherwise, I would ask for a group vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion carries unanimous, and the amendments to the design manual are adopted. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which follows this. Consider an ordinance to amend Chapter 215 Restaurants of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach by amending different sections, 215-1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, 18, plus inserting a new section 215-21 and inserting a new Article 5 relating to establishing regulations for outdoor dining on public space and a licensing procedure for outdoor dining on public space. Evan, do you have anything you want to say? Again, the intent of this exercise was to codify the design manual so that it carried more weight.
Correct.
You
I have
want
no further comments, Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, then I just want to mention myself before we go to the public that Chapter 215 in the design manual, I think we've talked about them many times. This is this particular thing as far as the changes in the design manual and the code, I think are good. It's a good thing for us. First of all, it allows for outdoor dining on public space, on public sidewalks is what we're talking about. It allows for year-round opportunities at the discretion of the restaurateur. If you recall before, we've had 3 years of outdoor dining on public space, and we terminated the permits November 1st, and they had to reapply. So now they'll be able to do it year-round basis as they choose to do. We suggest sturdier barriers for pedestrian safety so the barriers don't move around. And we advise of closing guidelines such as no storage within the area if you leave your barrier and dining area up, and the sidewalks need to be passable. It gives the design manual the force of law. It codifies the same or similar authorization process as for permitting dining patios on restaurant premises through the permit of compliance process. That is a supplemental permit of compliance. So we've established that, and I just want to remind everybody that licensing still is through the State Alcohol Commissioner. That is unchanged. With that, are there any members of the public that would like to speak for or against these amendments to Chapter 215 restaurants, essentially primarily codifying the design manual for outdoor dining on public space, but also entertaining some minor changes? Anybody? Very good, very good. Thank you very much. With that, I'll close the public opportunity to speak, and we'll come back to the commissioners. Open for any additional discussion or a motion to adopt the ordinance before us, dated version 3, dated December 7th, 2022.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 215 Restaurants of the Municipality Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, 2001, by amending Sections 215.1, 215.2, 215.3, 215.10, 215.11, 215.12, 215.13, 215.17, 215.18, inserting new sections 215.21, and inserting a new Article 5 relating to the established regulations for outdoor dining on public space and a licensing procedure for outdoor dining on public space, version number 3, dated December 7th.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Patrick Gossett and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 215, various sections, plus inserting various sections and regulations per the proposal in front of us. Is there any additional discussion?
I'd just like to add my thanks to Evan Miller and the team at Building and Licensing to help put this together. I think it's been a long time in coming, but been a very objectively worked on and tried to find all of the aspects to make it as easy as possible for our restaurants to be involved with this and also give them the flexibility that's needed for dining on public space. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you. Ditto, and I think you all did a good job. I think it's all well thought out overall, as a compliments to the commissioners as well. With that, we'll conduct a group vote. If there's any objection, then I'll go back and do a roll call vote. All those in favor of the proposed amendment to Chapter 215 as noted in front of us, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? And the motion's carried unanimously. Remember that both the design manual and the changes to 215 go into effect immediately, I believe. And also don't forget that for those that we have been talking about, patios on public property, public space, public sidewalks. The dining patios on restaurant premises, that's all unchanged. We've addressed that before. So back to our topic. If you had a license and a permit to have an outdoor patio on public space, remember it is expired as of November 1st. And just a reminder, Carol, maybe you can help us, that those restaurants that want to do it again have to reapply to Building and Licensing. They also have to seek a permit of compliance, a supplemental permit of compliance, just like they would do for dining patio on restaurant premises. And then finally, they also need to be reminded that after securing permissions from the city, they need to then seek state alcohol commissioner permission and licensing. Is there any further comment? Thank you very much. With that, we're moving right along. We will go to item C of old business, which is to consider an ordinance to amend Chapter 105, demolition of buildings of the municipal code by amending sections 105-1, 105-2, 105-3, and 105-4, and to include amending Chapter 109, moving of buildings of the city code by amending sections 109-1, 109-2, 109-3, and 109-4. Just a reminder that we resumed discussion of this on October 11th. We had additional conversation on November 7th and 18th and December 5th. So this is the 5th meeting we're talking about it. Before we go to the commissioners and the public, Evan, would you like to say anything? Evan's been the primary author working with building and licensing to amend this, and we appreciate their help. Commissioners, is there anything you'd like to offer before I go to the public? Nope. If not, is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this specific ordinance to amend Chapter 105 before us today? If not, then we'll go back to the commissioners. I would entertain either more discussion or a motion to adopt a version 4 dated December 7th of the proposed amendments to the ordinance on Chapter 105, buildings, demolition of, et cetera.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt an ordinance to amend Chapter 105, buildings, demolition of, and Chapter 109, buildings, moving of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, 2001, relating to establishing regulations for building, demolitions, and move, version number 4, dated December 7th, 2022.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Patrick Gossett and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to adopt the amendments to Chapter 105, demolition of buildings, appropriate corresponding sections, and to amend Chapter 109, moving of buildings, and corresponding sections of the code. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll do a group call, and if there's any objections, then we'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor of the proposed amendments to the Chapters 105 and Chapter 109 before us today signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And that motion is also carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Again, a lot of thought went into that, and we appreciate that, helping to clarify things. With that, we're going to go to the next item, D of old business, and that is to consider an ordinance to amend Chapter 253, trees of the municipal code by deleting Section 253-2 in its entirety and inserting in lieu thereof a new Section 253-2 to amend eligibility to serve on Parks and Shade Tree Commission. There are support documents in your embedded in the agenda. And if you recall, this was discussed at a public meeting December 7th. November 7th, November 18th, December 5th. So this is the 4th time we're talking about it. Specifically, the changes are from existing code. The qualifications for membership are that the members be citizens and residents of the city. And the proposal actually is taken from the new revised tree code. And the change is that the membership qualifications is that they would be residents or property owners of the city. And that's the mere change there, and we've talked about that several times. Is there any conversation up here before I go to the public? Is there any member of the public that would like to say anything on this? If not, then we'll go right to entertaining additional discussion or a motion to approve the, or actually there's an ordinance that's embedded in the agenda too. And the ordinance is dated November 11th, version 1, and it's specific to amending Chapter 253 trees of the Municipal Code, Section 253-2, inserting a new Section 253-2 relating to the membership eligibility requirements. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I just have a clarification. Since you brought up the revised tree code, am I correct? I was going back through my notes that I'm just trying to figure out if we had already passed if we were inclined to do so, the new tree code, this vote would be unnecessary. Is that right?
Correct.
And so I'm curious, I think where we left off on the tree ordinance was that it was to go to vendors, the tree vendors and the public. Has that step been
No,
taken yet?
we're in the middle of a legal review and expect that to be done soon. And then we'll be distributing it to the landscapers and tree vendors, putting it on the website. And so I expect to receive comments and resume discussion of this in January. I'm not sure it'll be ready for the January workshop.
Okay, the only reason I ask is I know that Commissioner Gay spent so much time and effort on this issue, and when I was going back through my notes from September 13th, we had a 5-step plan to put this to bed by the November voting meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that none of it gets lost in the shuffle, and that after the first of the year we could move as
Right.
expeditiously as
Right.
possible.
Well,
on this.
number one, the Delaware way. I said November. I didn't say what year.
Mayor.
But on a serious note, former Commissioner Gay, Susan Gay, that's been leading the charge, is well aware of all our time constraints and everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
In fact, the additional thing we did was a comparison chart to be able to accompany the revised tree code that shows what is new and what is
Okay.
old and everything. So
Okay.
it is moving along. So
Okay.
back to this, yes, if we had adopted that, this would be moot. However, if you recall, one previous meeting, I brought this up initially. It was because I was afraid it was just the opposite, that if the tree code takes till January or February, I wanted to get this resolved sooner than later.
Thank you.
All righty? So
Mayor, I move we amend Chapter 253-2 to amend eligibility to serve on Parks and Shade Tree Commission. The ordinance dated 11 November 22, version 1.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 253 trees that's before us, dated November 11th, version 1. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll do a group vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the motion is also carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Glad to move that forward. Now I can seek out new members for the Parks and Shade Tree Commission because we have one vacancy. And actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a comment. But we also, I might as well mention that we have a vacancy on the Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee too. So please be aware, and if you're interested in those committees, please submit an application. With that, where are we on E, old business E? Consider adoption of updates to the city's investment policy. So we, at the last meeting, had a investment policy to look at, correct?
Correct, Mayor.
And we have a red line version, I think, online, but there's also an ordinance, I believe, 11.
Resolution.
Tree. So here's the resolution. Do you want Glenn to read the resolution, or
Sure enough, I'd be happy to do it.
or do you?
Yeah, I just want to briefly touch on the changes from the previous version. So on line 31, we added "and finance director" after city manager. So again, that sentence would read, "Authority to manage the investment program is granted to the city manager and finance director of the city of Rehoboth Beach, who shall refrain from personal business activity that could impair their ability to make impartial decisions." We also added line 33, the city manager and finance director. Line 42, again, city manager and finance director. Line 47, city manager and finance director are authorized to deposit funds in any FDIC insured bank, which was added. Also, financial institution or SPIC member brokerage firm. That was an update from the previous version. Line 49, city manager and finance director are authorized to invest directly in obligations of the United States of America. And then two other changes from the previous version. Lines 95 and 96 reads, the city manager shall prepare an investment performance report for the July, October, January, and April regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners that provides a clear picture of the status of the current investments. And then finally, line 106 and 107, any deviation from this investment policy shall be made only with the written authorization of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. And that includes all the changes from the previous version, Mayor.
Any questions about the changes that were made from the last time we talked? They are in red line version embedded in the agenda. Is everybody okay with that? Glenn, do you want to read the resolution?
I'm happy to
please?
read it, Mayor. It is longer than I recalled, so if there's no legal requirement, I'm happy to do it, though, if you'd
Let
like
me
to
see,
have it
where
read in.
are we? Is there a synopsis at the end of it?
There is not a synopsis, I don't believe.
Synopsize it then, instead of having to read the whole thing.
Evan, do you want to synopsize it?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Or maybe Bert is here if he wants to synopsize it. But
Well, essentially, what
Happy to read it.
we're doing is, I'm going to be asking shortly for a motion to adopt the resolution before us, and the purpose of the resolution before us is it authorizes us to revise the city investment policy.
That's right. Yep.
All right? So, like any talk up here before I go to the public? Anybody up here? Any members of the public like to offer a comment? If not, we'll bring it back to the commissioners. I'd entertain more discussion or a motion to adopt the resolution before us that'll authorize us to revise the city's investment policy.
Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the resolution by the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach revising the city's investment policy as described in version 3 dated December 7th.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Patrick Gossett and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to adopt the resolution before us that authorizes us to revise the city's investment policy. Is there any additional discussion? If not, we'll do a group call, and if there's any objections, we'll go for a roll call vote. All those in favor of adoption of the resolution, in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And the resolution is adopted. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, the next item on the agenda is old business F. Consider amending start date and employment agreement with new city manager Lawrence Christian to December 30th, 2022, which is 4 days earlier than the original agreement. Want him here as soon as possible, so I think we're all probably likely going to vote in favor of this, but let's get some history of that, Evan, if you would, please.
Sure. So you'll recall that in order for the new city manager to be eligible for benefits effective January 1st, in this case, the start date of January 3rd, he would need to begin his employment the previous or the month prior to the month the benefits would start. So in this case, in order to be eligible for benefits effective January 3rd, which was his original start date, he would need to be in employment December 30th to be eligible for those benefits.
Any questions? Any members of the public have anything? If not, well, I would entertain a motion merely to make a motion to authorize the mayor, I need help here, mayor to amend the start date and employment agreement with the new city manager to December 30th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Tony Sharp to authorize the mayor to amend the start date in the employment agreement with new city manager Lawrence Christian to December 30th, 2022. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And so the motion carries unanimously. So you'll let him, Lawrence, know, and we'll get him 4 days earlier. very good. With that, we're at the spot where the next item of business is discussion of the CDP, and as I announced at the beginning of the meeting, I'd like to reverse that and switch with new business A, presentation by Johnson, Murmuran, and Thompson Engineering Consultants, JMT, on the power and utility undergrounding plug study of the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape project, including but not limited to master schedule development and construction phasing, cost estimating, project funding analysis, and that's all. I'm going to turn it over to Evan.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. I'm just going to ask Ann to turn over control to the lectern. There is a PowerPoint presentation for today. So with us today are Jay, David, and Angie from JMT. You'll recall that quite some time ago when the mayor and commissioners authorized the staff or tasked the staff with proceeding with looking at undergrounding utilities to the greatest extent feasible as part of the streetscape concept review process and streetscape project. We partnered with JMT to help us develop a master schedule for that work, also look at a funding plan for that work, and so they are here today to give a presentation on that study. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. And my name's Jay Smith. I'm with Johnson.
Jay, can you just pull the microphone as
sure.
close to your mouth as possible? Thanks.
I'm with JMT. We're here to present on the study we did to assess the scheduling and funding of the streetscaping and the power line undergrounding for the Wilmington Avenue and Baltimore Avenues between the boardwalk and 2nd Street. Basically, what we've done is we looked at this holistically. I'm trying to get this stuff in. There we go. We looked at this holistically. So we took, if you were here in December of last year, we did a presentation on the power line and utility undergrounding and how that could be done. And then we combined that with the streetscaping elements of this to look at how this project could be built from a scheduling standpoint and also how it could be funded for construction and design. So this is the project area here. You can see it's Baltimore Avenue from the boardwalk up to 2nd Street, including parts of 2nd Street and 1st Street, as well as Wilmington Avenue from the boardwalk to 2nd Street, and again, including parts of 2nd and 1st Street, parts that weren't done as part of the Rehoboth Avenue streetscaping project. So our scope to do this work was to look at it again holistically and how we could come up with a schedule for this. And that starts with establishing how long procurement is going to take and the procurement requirements, establishing a schedule to do the actual design, including the power line and utility undergrounding and the streetscaping elements. We also work with the utility owners, Verizon, Pepco, excuse me, not Pepco, Delmarva, to come up with a schedule to do their part of the work also. So there's a major coordination element for them to do this work. Then we establish how we would build this with consideration for like summertime activities and how we want to minimize disruption on these streets. And then from that, we work with our CM group to establish a construction schedule for both the streetscape and utility undergrounding. Then we were asked to also look at how we could fund the project and potential sources for money to do that. So we look at the schedule and costs and how we develop that. One of the things we discussed with the city was minimizing disruption on these streets. So first part of that is phasing the project. And that is doing one block at a time, essentially for Baltimore Avenue and Wilmington Avenue. So during phase one, the construction and design would take place from the boardwalk to First Street for both of these streets. And then phase one would be done construction-wise, and phase two would start from a construction standpoint so that you don't have the entire 2 blocks being disrupted for construction. So we divide it up into 2 phases. Now, including in the design and construction schedule was the effort to underground the utilities. And again, we presented a detailed study on that last December. There is also, holistically, again speaking, incorporation of some water main, water service upgrades the city wants to do. If we're going to dig up the street, we might as well do that work, as well as some sewer rehabilitation work. And then, of course, all of the streetscaping elements, sidewalks, street reconstruction, plazas, landscaping, et cetera. So, we had to develop some parameters and assumptions to come up with this schedule, at which we're going to present here shortly. So some of the assumptions, we assumed that the funding is going to be available to do the work. We incorporated a construction restricted period of May 15th to September 15th, so businesses, pedestrians, et cetera, aren't interrupted or disrupted during the busy summer period. We assumed that Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue would proceed concurrently, again, like our phasing 1 block at a time. And we thought best that they be bid separately so that work could be done on the first phase and other work could be done on the second phase concurrently. We assumed that all this work, both the streetscaping and utility undergrounding, is under the control and direction and management of one general contractor, and he's going to have to very closely coordinate with the utility owners because they have a stake in this project also as part of the undergrounding type work. We've also assumed that there's no delays for right-of-way or right of entry that will be needed for each property owner, because you can imagine each property owner has an aerial utility connection going to their house. There are a few that are underground, but most have an aerial connection, so that will then need to be buried. There's going to need to be some disturbance on these people's property to get that work done, so there's going to have to be an effort to coordinate with each property owner to get permission to do that. And we assume that there's no permitting or NEPA, which is National Environmental Policy Act, requirement, and that often comes along with federal funding. Usually you get what is often called a categorical exclusion because we don't really have any serious, there's no endangered species or cultural or historical issues. So we wouldn't anticipate that there would be any kind of delays for those kind of things. Again, items that could impact the schedule, again, we mentioned the right of entry or right of ways that may be needed for the utility undergrounding work. Any delays from the utility owners, Delmarva, Verizon, Comcast, there's a couple of small other ones that are involved here, but generally those are the utilities that we're going to be dealing with, and at times they're not always 100% cooperative, so we can't we can't predict if there's any delays that would result from their efforts. Again, I mentioned the NEPA stuff, it's National Environmental Policy Act. And, big issue nowadays is supply chain. We don't know if anything would result from that, those kind of things that are happening nowadays. So again, we developed this schedule, and this is kind of just an overview, kind of a flow chart, if you will, of how this would proceed. Starting in 2023, we'd start the preliminary design and for the entire project, and then the final design also would proceed for phase 1. And then proceeding, we'd get phase 1 under construction, and the final design for phase 2 would proceed. And then the final design ends, the construction for phase 1 ends, construction for phase 2 begins, as we showed in the phasing, how this would be phased. And then eventually, this ends in 2029. So you're basically talking around 7 years for the whole process. Looking at it in a little bit more detail from a scheduling standpoint, and we have some dollar numbers here that we're going to provide you a little bit more detail, but it kind of shows you sort of a cash flow, if you will, of how much you would need during the fiscal year to pay for some of the activities that we anticipate to happen during the schedule. So you can see again, the preliminary design for phase 1 and phase 2 is proceeding, and that's estimated to take about 8 months. And then we start the final design for phase 1, and that takes about 12 months. And then we proceed to the next part of the schedule. We then have a procurement period for bidding for the phase 1 construction work, which we estimate around 4 months. And then that kind of leads us to that construction restriction period from May 15th to September 15th before construction would start in September for phase 1. And we estimate that phase 1 will take about 17 and a half months to build, including the construction restricted periods. And then during that same time period, we then go to bid for phase 2. We then proceed again, a little gap from the end of phase 1 construction to phase 2. Again, another restricted period. And construction would start in September and proceed for about 2 years until that construction is anticipated to end in fiscal year 7 and calendar year 2029. So the cash flow that we're showing there in the fiscal years is, again, what we estimate the amount of money you would have to expend to pay the engineer or the contractor to do this work. And it incorporates inflation. We weren't sure, exactly what inflation was going to be. At one time, we thought, well, I think the discussion was to use 8%. But then, since inflation was dropping, and I think the most recent number the Feds gave out was 7.1%, I believe. And so this these tables sort of show the expenditures that be required, including inflation, during that period of the project. So you can see with a 4% inflation, the total cost for power line undergrounding, all of this work that we're doing here, the streetscaping, the street reconstruction, et cetera, with a 4% inflation rate is around $44 million. And then if inflation goes higher, then we're talking closer to $50 million. And you can again see what the cost would be for the fiscal year, and then what element of the project would, design, phase 1 construction, phase 2 construction is included in that cost. So I'm going to turn it over to Angie Hernandez now. She's going to talk about the possibilities for funding the project.
All right. Hi, everybody. So as Jay mentioned, part of our scope was to identify potential sources of funding. Within that, we looked at both federal and state funding options that were out there, and we were looking really for the grants was the big kind of item. Let's see what kind of grant funding is available out there. We also explored set-asides funding. And I'll break it right now of what I'm going to break down. We looked at a lot. We looked at a lot of just different ways that you could pair grants together. We carved through the eligible activities within each grant to really identify, is there a grant that can cover it all? Are there grants that can cover pieces of it? How could we fund this all together? So I'm not going to present you all of the research that we did. We're just going to present to you the items that we saw as potential, really worth exploring and thinking about. So the first one I'm going to talk to you about is the state grant option with DelDOT for the Transportation Alternative Program. So this grant is definitely an eligible activity for this project. It was actually used to fund the planning study that was done that has already been in motion. So there's already a history built with DelDOT on this project, which is also great. So this grant you can use for both design and construction activities for streetscape improvement work. But with every grant program, you have to understand the devil's of the details. So this grant's limit is $1 million cap each year. That's all you can ask for. You can't go up above. You can't say, well, if I apply in 3 years, can I stack it? No, it's $1 million each year. That's your cap. There is a 20% grant match requirement, so that does have to be a locally matched requirement. And this grant cycle, it runs every year. It's relatively around the same time frame. So just for sake of saying it, September of 2022 is when the grant cycle closed this past cycle. So they're currently combing through the applications at DelDOT, figuring out who they're going to award, and then those awards will be made in the following year and be available moving forward. So relatively speaking, it's a get your stuff filled out and ready to apply come fall of each year. But the time frame can change just based on how quickly DelDOT moves with these grants. Another federal grant that we identified that we really think is worth exploring is something through FEMA. So it's called BRIC is the acronym here. Grants, they love their acronyms. So it's Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. The purpose of this grant program is to create sustainability because of natural disasters and other things that can happen. It's FEMA, that makes sense, emergency management. Within this grant, there's a lot of eligible activities, but one of the eligible activities is the utility protection hardening of assets against climate change and extreme weather events. So I will say finding grant funding for utilities is really, it's a combing through process. So we were really excited about this grant potential. This one also comes with its own strings. The strings on this one is really the first step is to start talking to the regional office to determine the eligibility of this project to this grant program. So what that really looks like is they want to talk to you, they want to understand what is your project, what's the scope of it. There is likely going to be studies that they want to understand the level of impact, what is the reward of doing this. So likely studies that need to happen. But the first step is to start coordinating at the local level to figure out what the requirements will be and if it is in fact eligible. So this one, I cannot confidently say, absolutely, this is a great grant that you are eligible for. It's one that is a potential. It's not the same as the TAP one where I can more confidently say that's a good eligible project. This one as well has a match requirement. Typically it's a 25% match, but FEMA also has their own kind of situation that they will evaluate each project, so there might be other requirements that come with that match. Again, a conversation that needs to happen with them to fully understand what they would expect out of it. So this application period, it's open now, but it is not, I'm not recommending you try to hurry up and shove it in right now because it's closing very fast. And knowing that they want to have this ongoing coordination, they want to have some kind of studies, there's more that they want to understand. It's definitely worth getting a meeting and starting to talk with them about the ability for this grant program and then getting ready for the next application period whenever it does open up. So this one I was excited about as well because you have time to prepare for it now. So even though you're not able to get it in January of next year, you are able to prepare and start working with FEMA to figure out the eligibility. One of the set-aside options that we found is through the state. This itself is not a big pot of money for sure. So the community trust funds, this is funds that are allocated to state legislators each session. The last session, the state legislators each got $350,000 to allocate to projects of their choosing. They typically go to smaller projects that are kind of quick fixes that it will take a longer time to address, but if they can program it for a good community need, that's what they want to see and program it for. There is a little bit of stacking that legislators can do, that they can hold their money for a little bit and then make it a little bigger, but even stacking it for a few years, it's still not a giant amount in the numbers that Jay was presenting to you of the full project cost. So it helps, it's a little bit, but it's not the whole project cost. So with that, I don't know if we should hold for questions or if I'm turning it over to Bert, wherever Bert is.
Any questions? Commissioner LeGree.
Starting with the DelDOT grants, is there a yearly cap? Is there a total cap? Is this to be shared with anybody? Do you know, can we keep applying for those each year?
You can keep applying each year. It's $1 million cap per year that it caps out at.
You can do from year 1 to year 7? Or whenever?
Yes.
Yes.
Keep applying, yeah.
Yeah, you can keep applying. It's a competitive process, though. Nothing is ever guaranteed. You got to compete, you got to
course.
win.
It's an 80-20, right?
Yes.
Do you have a top limit on FEMA?
I don't have a top limit on that one. This one, it's harder to get information on this one by online. They keep it more in-house, and that's where the first step of talking with them to better understand the program is really vital, which we have not done that yet. We haven't initiated conversations with FEMA yet.
Have you talked to other municipalities who have had access to that and have gotten those grants?
No,
So you
not
have
at this
no
point.
idea on total, on years, on, thank you. And this state and local, is this 350K, as I remember, that's just spread for everybody. It's what Pete or Ernie gets and.
Correct. Right.
Yeah, so that's a consideration. Those are all my questions for right now.
All right, well, I can turn it over.
Yeah, I would ask Bert to come up and talk through some of the funding sources from the city. And while Bert's making his way up to the podium, if you want to fast forward to the next slide, I can talk a little bit to the annual capital budget. So certainly the annual capital budget is an opportunity that we have to fund portions of the streetscape utility undergrounding. Our current fiscal year capital budget is $6.4 million. So just keep that in mind in terms of dedicated funding stream from the capital budget. If we were to take, say, $3 million, use that for utility undergrounding, that is about half of our current capital budget, which would require us to cut down significantly on that annual capital budget. And I will defer to Bert on the rest of those funding sources.
Do you have that broken out, Evan? How much for undergrounding, how much for infrastructure of wastewater, stormwater?
We do not. Right now, we just have it broken out by fiscal year, how much we think. So we've looked at the project holistically to say everything that we want to do, including streetscape, utility work. I think we still need to do a lot of investigation in terms of design of that utility work and what we really need to do. But we are looking at it again as a holistic project, doing everything at once as opposed to sort of piecemealing it. So
I'll be kind of direct by starting off and just say this is a very, very heavy lift. It's going to require a lot of our borrowing capacity. It's going to require more usage of our reserve cash than anything we've ever done. We have loan capacity of $75 million. You'd have to go to referendum to increase that limit. Right now, we have about $15 million in that loan capacity. So I think I'll be brief and say that you're going to have to use up probably 50% of your reserves that you have in your transfer tax, your sewer, and your water, just to give yourself a cushion for other things. So I really think that we're going to need more grant support to minimize the investment and the risk that the city's going to have. I mean, if you're talking $50 million, internally, I think that it's difficult. Go ahead.
Any idea on how much we're going to get that cushion enlarged at 7 years down the road?
Well, that's a good point, because we've been collecting transfer tax at a pretty heavy rate. I'm not a forecaster, but I do know this year our transfer tax is going to decline from what it has been the last 2 years. So you could, I think, probably fairly assume that we probably could have $2.5 million coming in over each year of this construction. So that's a positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anybody else up here? Questions?
I have a question overall.
Commissioner Bennett, go ahead.
Does this include the project that you had the I guess, committee working on for beautification of these two streets as well? Or is that going to be an additional cost?
No, this includes the streetscape elements.
So this will be everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions, members of the public? All righty. Thank you very much, Bert. Any, is there any further presentation?
No, that's it.
All right. Any further questions for any of the presenters altogether?
Back to the grants question. Any of the Department of Transportation, the infrastructure grants raise, have you explored those at all?
Yeah, we looked at all of those.
Angie, yeah, sorry.
Take your choice.
So we looked at all of the federal infrastructure bill funds. So there's multiple grant programs that are in there. RAISE is one that's been around for a while. RAISE itself is likely not a great source because of the character of the RAISE grants and the types of projects that are typically funded with it. It's more of a regional, like major transportation investment that you're competing very, highly there. And the project type just isn't right within it. I mean, there's nothing ever stopping you from trying and trying to apply, but when we looked at it, it just didn't feel like a strong recommendation worth really exploring much further because of the very strict kind of project criteria. Once you get in it, you see that you're not going to score that well in a lot of the categories, so that there's going to be other projects that are going to score better in it. There's also been some new grants that have come out that, like, I'm a transportation planner. I got excited seeing the feds putting out more money in these new grant programs, but they have certain qualifying characteristics, again, and it's based on your population, it's based on demographics data, it's based on the type of project that it is. And even though there's new sources available, again, this project didn't fit the criteria of what they're looking for. So we tried to explore everything that there is kind of in that federal infrastructure bill. But the best option that we really found was FEMA, actually, for the undergrounding at that federal grant level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jay, I have a question for you, just to clarify. I left the room for a second. I just want to make sure we all understand that when it says that there are 2 phases to this, that does not equate to years, correct?
No, I can go
Because
back.
how I read it is a 7-year program with 2030
Yeah, I think this
as the end. There you go.
the flow chart kind of
Right.
lays it out.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't misconstrue 2 phases equals 2 years. It's certainly longer than that.
Again, these are the assumptions we used to develop the schedule and the fund and, the timeline for this. There's other ways to skin the cat, obviously. You could do it all in one contract and have one contractor phase it. I mean, there's different ways you could do it. It's just the assumptions we use to develop our schedule.
Right.
Question. I'm sorry.
Let me finish. The other note that I have is that all the dates there are what I call based on an optimistic budget forecast, right? I mean, if we don't have the money year 1, then everything's pushed back again, because this is quite a considerable cost. And I just, while I have the floor, I just want to admit, we will embed this presentation in the agenda after the fact so that everybody can go access it, look at it. Thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, just curious on funding sources. We, in past years, actually, when the Avenue Inn was looking at restructuring themselves and redoing, they came to the city with a proposal that they would cost share with undergrounding the utilities there. At that time, and I don't know if it's changed, but at that time, we had no process in place to be able to do a cost-sharing project with that. We've got the Beach Patrol building. We've also have 3 hotels coming online, 2 on Baltimore Avenue and 1 on Wilmington Avenue. Has there been any exploration with any of those developers for cost-sharing on undergrounding utilities, any of that nature?
Not under this assessment. I mean, that's certainly something that, if somebody's going to build a hotel, it would
3
certainly make
hotels.
sense
Yeah.
for them to underground their utility services to the building so that you don't have another aerial thing that you have to underground. So I would say during the review process, if you could ask that developer to do that, that would, save costs in the future.
Thank you.
If that answers your question.
I just don't know that we have anything in a process that
Right.
we can even establish those relationships at this time.
Yeah, I think that's part of the difficulty is the scheduling of all of this stuff and the timing of it. Certainly would be something, I know we've had previous conversations about when we were talking about streetscape, possibly looking at, once we do the streetscape design, we know what we want, we know where we want it, and possibly approaching some of these hotels. So during that construction process, they aid in some of those streetscapes so that everything's consistent and matches up with our concept. So certainly would be something I think that we pursue as part of design and just coordination with the hotels once we know more as we progress.
Commissioner Sternowski and then Commissioner Bennett.
A question on the schedule first. It looks like phase one you had at 17 months. And in phase two, though, it was 25 months over two years, essentially. Why the difference?
Well, part of it is there's two construction restriction periods in there, so that extends it out. And it's what was developed, there was a whole assessment done from the construction, what needs to be built. And so that's also comes into play also. So, and the time periods when it's being built. So that's why it's a different period.
Related to funding, I guess I'm rather disappointed that the three funding mechanisms that were identified are the three that I am already intimately aware of. The fact that there's not other avenues that have been identified, I think, is rather disappointing and is almost a huge problem with this possibly moving forward. There's no way we can fund this project with, $1 million from DelDOT. And, we don't know the amounts of FEMA, but I imagine they're not going to be anywhere close to what we need them to be. And so the other thing, I thought that one of the main reasons of this, having this, going through this motion and having this presentation was for us to decide whether we were going to underground or not. I don't think we can make that decision without knowing what portion of that cost is directly related to undergrounding. So I don't know how we can move forward in making a decision if that information isn't.
Well, that's
ready for us.
important because, Evan, you can explain that DelDOT will not pay for any undergrounding.
Right.
Because that's not part of a transportation program, right?
Right.
So that's a good point. Breaking it out, we need to know.
That's correct. And I think, again, some of the complexity is, so I think if I'm thinking back to Rossi's presentation on the streetscape, I think that alone was about $25 to $30 million projected. So, it would be difficult, or I wouldn't think it would make sense to pursue undergrounding utilities and not the streetscape, because as part of the utility undergrounding, there will naturally be some streetscape that has to occur because of the work that's done. So I think at this point, it's a question of doing the undergrounding utilities and the streetscape, or just the streetscape project.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting
Right.
that we underground and not do streetscape. The question is whether we do streetscape and include undergrounding or not.
Right.
But
Well, remember, you were on the Wilmington-Baltimore Task Force. Remember that task force indicated that the number one priority for this project was the ability to underground. Now, we didn't go further and say, okay, if that doesn't happen, are you okay with it? Or if it doesn't happen, what are the alternatives? The project stalls 100%, or you clean up the aerial poles, which was one of our conversations, just you clean up all the poles and you all make it look nicer and everything. But we really never got to that point, so.
if someone could just gut check my math, if the original streetscape cost proposal or estimate was around 25 to 30, that's putting undergrounding at somewhere between 20 and 25. Is that, that's
The-
fair?
the- I think that was in today's cost. If I remember, I don't have the number handy, but if I remember, I think it was around 11 million to do the undergrounding work in today's cost. The costs we were showing you here consider from 4 to 8% inflation over time. So, you know, if there's a recession, obviously that's not going to have 8% inflation. But that's the number that we introduced in today's cost for the undergrounding work.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Bennett?
So for the, on the schedule, so when does construction start?
Well, the construction, the initial phase one, essentially what's, you know, it depends here, obviously, but we're assuming it's going to start in September of fiscal year 3, which would be 2025.
25, okay. And if we did not have those 4 or 5 months where we're not doing anything, the May 15th through September 15th, 2 questions. What does that look like for those 2 streets? And B, if we continued working during that time to speed up the project, would that change the funding or the cost at all?
I would say yes, because, the contractor basically shut down for those 5 months, demobilize. So that's a cost that, he has to put in his bid. So if the contractor is able to work during the summer period, which is obviously the meat part of the construction season, the summer period. So, a lot of this construction schedule is wintertime, which could impact when he construct, if there's a snowstorm or whatever. So I would say it would reduce the cost and certainly would reduce the amount of time. However, the concern is that you're impacting pedestrians and businesses during the busy summer period when a lot of these businesses make their money. So,
No, I understand that. It just seems to me to have those streets in disarray for 3 years or whatever it is also not acceptable. But that's why I was wondering what it looks like when they're not doing anything for 5 months. What's it look like?
yeah, whatever stage they were at, we'd have to put a requirement in the contract. They'd have to button everything up, patch any kind of excavations in the street, fix up the sidewalk temporarily until they can come back in September and restart construction.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of logistics there, because obviously in the summertime, you put a fence down the middle, if you will, so that there's traffic banned from one side of the street, but not the other. And then, as you were saying, as I understand it, for the summer season, then the fence comes down and parking's restored somehow so that we can get through summer. And I guarantee you the business owners are going to be looking at that. I mean, that's their patronage parking, so. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Again, is there anybody, member of the public that wants to say anything? If not, this isn't the end of it. We've got, this is our first introduction to this, and we're going to embed it in the agenda, and we will have further conversation about it. Now we kind of know what to focus on in the future. Very good. Thank you all, and you don't need to stay. You're welcome to leave, but we thank you for coming today. Our next item of business is discussion of implementation of the 2022 Comprehensive Development Plan, including seeking to confirm prioritization of action items. I'm not sure we'll get as far as confirming priorities, but I do think this will be a good introductory talk about prioritization. Remember, we're talking about the Comprehensive Development Plan. I would like us to be mindful that the Comprehensive Development Plan, or CDP, is state mandated. And our own CDP is a product of the Planning Commission, developed with substantial public input. It's recommended by the Planning Commission to the Board of Commissioners on May 13th, 2022, after years of development. It was adopted by the Board of Commissioners on June 28, 2022, And we received notice on November 15th, 2022, that Governor Carney also certified our CDP as of the same date, June 28th, 2022. If you don't know it, the Planning Commission is a planning tool. Our CDP is a planning tool, includes visions of the future, goals and action items to achieve those goals. If you haven't read it, I would hope you read it. At least start off with the executive summary. You've got just a fantastic amount of information in there about the history of the city and what the future vision goals are that have been established. Now, note that the status of addressing the CDP action items has to be reported by the Planning Commission to the state and on an annual basis and fully updated every 10 years. So this is a very, very important document with components that have the force of law. Today's meeting and likely additional future meetings will focus on implementation of the CDP. You know, we have never really had we've had, what, 2 CDPs prior to this, I guess. We've really never had a methodical approach to implementation of the CDP. In the past, a commissioner would sponsor an action item on agendas and carry that through to realization, hopefully carry it through to realization. Sometimes nobody was interested and they got dropped. But with teamwork of this group up here, I believe we can define steps to a more organized approach for the implementation, including specifically identifying priorities for addressing the action items spelled out in the CDP. There is a Chapter 8 in the Certified CDP that focuses on implementation, but it really omits giving specific steps. So per our planner's guidance, our first task is to establish which of 88 identified action items we as a board want to focus on for the next year, being mindful that the CDP is a 10-year plan. So how I look at it is we can spread out which action items we do each year. It's reasonable and realistic to take small steps in addressing implementation. We don't have to do it all in one year. The number 10 that we'll be talking about later is not a fixed nor a magical number. It's just something I picked out of the air. That I think is a good starting point for, again, we'll talk about it in a few minutes. And we have plenty on our plates already, frankly, for next year. We've got the 226 plus code things to review. We've got 20 zoning code things to review. We've got ongoing CDP items to address. So we've got a lot on our plate. I'm just saying we need to be cautious about how much we bite off this very first year, in my opinion. I wanted to review the instructions to you that I gave out to the Board of Commissioners. We have, Ann, if you can put our screen back up. Looks like I have to start over. Yeah, hold on a second. I'd like to bring something back up on the screen. It's hard to see, but there were some recording sheets that were made and handed out to the Planning Commission, City Manager, and Board of Commissioners. So the instructions were for the commissioners to go through chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 that have the specific action items identified, and within those chapters for the 88 action items to identify 10 action items that represent your personal priorities or what you think are the priorities, and rank them 1 to 10, with 1 being the topmost selection. And then to identify any action items additionally that you believe are ongoing. And the instructions were to do not include those ongoing action items in your prioritization task, as they would already be in the queue. And we're going to review those shortly. Identify any action items you consider to be under the purview of the city manager, and do not include those action items in your prioritization list. Include any notes you're willing to share. The column for assign and sponsorship is intended for use later, but can be used now or sooner than later if desired. And so this is one sheet that was provided to the Board of Commissioners with instructions. We also gave instructions to the Planning Commission that was similar. However, at the beginning, I just tasked them with looking at Chapter 4 only, which is land use, and asked them similarly to rank 1 to 10, with 1 being the topmost, so that we can have an idea of what the majority of Planning Commission member. But I also asked the Planning Commission within Chapter 4 to identify anything that was ongoing, and to, again, do not include it as an action item in your prioritization task if you mention it as ongoing, because, again, that's already in the queue. And later, I talked with Mike Bryan, and I opened it up to the Planning Commission to additionally look beyond land use Chapter 4 to also look at Chapters 3, 5, 6, and 7 for anything specifically that they thought was the purview of the Planning Commission. In other words, electric vehicles and new charging stations may not be appropriate for the Planning Commission to prioritize, because that's not their purview in my mind. Additionally, we gave instructions to the interim city manager. As you know, our new city manager will be on board around December 30th. In the meantime, we had to get things started, so Evan has received the following instructions. These are a little different because his recordation sheet includes an earlier chapter with the operational action items, things that we don't have, but they're operational action items. And that consider all the priority, but also look at ranking them. I don't know if I changed that instruction or not, but to act on those, and also take a look at Chapters 3 through 7 additionally, and mark down, identify anything the Assistant City Manager thought also was the purview of the City Manager, so that we can analyze that. Likely the best time for us to take time and analyze that would be at our January 9th workshop meeting. I think our agenda content allows us to go back to the CDP during that workshop meeting so that we can continue this. So we're not going to finish everything today, obviously. So, as I think probably everybody that was doing this exercise understood, that there were some challenges, and there were some challenges identifying priorities, especially within multiple action items that were similar, and they overlapped. One example, small example, is historic preservation. There was a topic about implementing historic preservation, and then down 8 lines below, there's another something about historic preservation and how to handle that was left up to the individual score. How I handled it is I looked at all the things that were comparable or similar and picked the one I thought was the one to start with, but noting that most likely, if we were able to start on using that example, historic preservation, that most likely we would have to incorporate the other ones that related to it or associated to it. So I would like for Evan to give an overview of the ranking that he received from the commissioners and how he created this chart, which is different than the chart he handed out, because this chart is merely resequenced based on his ranking system. So I'd like Evan to go over that, and then I'd like to come back and give a couple other notes.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So Again, all the commissioners were tasked with identifying their top 10 priorities for the 88 action items identified in the Comprehensive Development Plan. Additionally, if time allowed and you felt it necessary, you could also rank which items you wanted to assign or you felt could be assigned to the city manager, which one of those it could be assigned to another group or be sponsored by another group, and also any items that you note as ongoing or currently in the works. And then finally, some comments to share as well. So what I had done was I took the top 10 priorities for each commissioner. I assigned a value to those priorities. So if number 1 was your top priority, that priority received 10 points. If 10 was your lowest priority, that received 1 point. So I assigned a value to those priorities, which that column, portion of that column is highlighted in green. And the green just points out those top 10 priorities based on the points assigned to those. Just to the left, you'll see the initials for the commissioner that had ranked that particular action item and the priority that was given to that item. Additionally, just X's indicate in the column for assignment to city manager whether or not there was a commissioner that felt it could be assigned to the city manager. Same goes for the ongoing column. So what I had done was just in terms of sorting, again, I sorted from the highest point value to the lowest. Secondly, what I had done was assigned or classified the priority with the highest ranking for assigned to city manager. So if 4 commissioners felt that it could be assigned to the city manager, that had a higher value than the others. And then finally, note as ongoing, if more commissioners felt that it was ongoing, that ranked a little bit lower because it's currently in the works. So that's sort of the process I followed. Again, highest point value, followed by assignment to city manager, followed by ongoing items. And I can answer any questions you might have. Certainly this was a difficult task, so I appreciate your help.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp, go ahead.
Well, I have several things to say about this. Having just received it last evening, to try to slog through a bit of it was challenging at best. What's really got me unsettled, and Evan, maybe you can help me. I hear what you're saying, that you gave a highest point value to the lowest number that was assigned to an item. Like if you rated it number 1, you gave it 10 points.
Right.
Well, what's gotten me really confused, and I'm hoping you can help me, is this memorandum on December 12th from Mike Bryant and Susan Gay. I spent a great deal of time with this document trying to assess why it reads that there is just nothing but discomfort in the way this has been done, and the result, it says, did not produce an ideal outcome. Now, I understand ideal outcome versus an outcome. So is it as simple as being assured that in the green items on this display, they really do represent the commissioner priorities? Or is this skewed as this memorandum says it is in just Chapter 4? I guess the short thing I'm trying to say is if all these challenges were surfaced in just Chapter 4, and that was 15 or so items to prioritize, wouldn't it extrapolate out to the commissioner's job of trying to rank 88? So something is not right in the way I'm trying to process through this.
Well, if you don't mind, let me jump in there first. I want to make sure you understand the Planning Commission's discomfort is, I think, with just that we're ranking things, period. That's what I got out of watching their meeting. It has nothing to do with Evan's ranking system, because Susan selected her own ranking system that's totally independent from what Evan did. So I just want to make sure that we understand that I think their comments are not, if I was thinking that you're thinking that they were saying that Evan's ranking system wasn't good. Because that is not the intent of their memo, I don't believe.
Yeah,
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I wouldn't be able to explain Susan Gay's prioritization. I mean, I would defer to her on sort of the approach that they took. Again, we had sort of introduced this at the last meeting as an approach that we wanted to take to help rank these items. I think it certainly provides a lot of information, and it can be looked at in different ways. I mean, for example, you could look at a priority item and where 5 commissioners ranked it as a priority, irregardless of what the priority was. Does higher ranking from the commissioners in terms of one action item has 5 commissioners who ranked it, another one has 4. Does that automatically mean that it is a higher priority, or is there value in having the points associated with those? I mean, we can find, I think one of the action items had 4 commissioners rank it, but they were ranked lowest. So that is not included in the top 10, but should it, because 4 commissioners had selected it as a priority. So I think this was, an exercise to at least start to take some steps towards identifying those priorities. I think there's value in having those top 10 priorities from the commissioners and being able to consolidate those in this fashion to at least give us a starting point. But in terms of the way that the Planning Commission approached it, I wouldn't be able to speak to.
So clarify for me one additional step. The document that's on the screen, is that not a compilation of Planning Commission?
It is not.
It is not?
It is not.
It is only commissioners?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so they've got their own independent document?
Correct.
Commissioner, I've found this challenging too. Obviously, I got to understand, this is the first time we've done it. We reached out to other towns and nobody could give us guidance. So we're on our own. And maybe we'll be a leader and teach others how to do this in the future.
Well, Mayor, just to clarify, I'm not criticizing any of it.
Yeah.
I completely appreciate and have been one of the stalwart annoyed people that we've never had an implementation plan. So I've been talking about this for years,
Right.
and now that it's in front of us,
Right.
it is challenging to try to get to what are the, what are the top 2 or 3 things we realistically think we'll be able to accomplish?
And that's kind of at this point how I'm approaching it. I understand his ranking system. I understand the Planning Commission's ranking system and could apply it here if I wanted. They have a little reverse addition that they do there. But I'm also looking at my own ranking system. If you look at the Evan screen, that's the one that's up there.
Yes.
You look at right here, which one's number 1? Oh, that's number 1, isn't it? Ranked number 1. But it only got 4 commissioners.
Right.
Patrick, Bunky, Ed, and Stan. Only 4 commissioners said this is a priority.
Yes.
And it became number 1.
Yes.
Now look at number 2 there, ranked number 2. There are 5 commissioners that ranked that, and that became a second priority. And then just go down. You've got 4, you've got 3, 3, 2, 1. The numbers I thought were interesting because technically, because there's 7 commissioners times 10 top priorities that we're asking to be identified. Technically, if there were no overlap, there could be 70 different action items there, right? But as it is, we have the 1 action item with 5 checks. We have 3 with 4 checks, meaning 4 commissioners signed on to them, 3 with 3 checks, 13 with 2 checks. That yields 20 overlaps. And then you've got 68 singles or no prioritization there. Again, I'm just looking at these different CESA and trying to come up with what makes sense to me because I don't know if everybody's going to be satisfied with the program.
Well, and I think, Mayor, you know how my mind works. I'm trying to figure out what is it that we can actually accomplish today on this particular document, and I'm just a bit lost.
Well,
So-
I tell you, one of the things I would like to accomplish, and that's one of the next things I wanted to talk about, is just a brief note on budgeting, but I would like to look at the ongoing items, because I wrote down here about, I don't know, maybe 20 ongoing items there. And remember, I said, don't rank them. Well, people did rank them, okay? So and then others, beyond my 20, others said other things were ongoing. If I have one goal today at least, is to introduce this topic, but also to look at the ongoing and validate. Because how I am looking at them is if they're ongoing, then we don't need to spend time on ranking them.
Right.
And some other things should go to the top of the ranking. So that is truly one of my goals today, Commissioner. And understanding what I said at the beginning is that my flow chart earlier indicated that hopefully today we were going to talk about this and prioritize them and confirm. Well, that's not going to happen. So if, as I mentioned earlier, we have that workshop meeting January 9th to give us more time to study some of these things. And then maybe even, I didn't ask anybody from the Planning Commission. Maybe they want to attend. And then by then we'll have the city manager, we'll have the interim city manager's rankings for operational and other items, but we'll also have the new city manager here. So I think there's going to be a lot that happens there. So again, I think this is challenging, but I think going through it, I think is a good exercise so that we can all ask questions and figure out what our next steps are. Commissioner Markert.
I had a comment, just simply, I do think this was a valid exercise, but I don't think it's something that we should use to basically rank them. To me, it gives us sort of an idea or a general idea of, is there any kind of unanimity of thought on the commission? And I think that shows that. I mean, we certainly, it ranks these topics that we sort of, scored highly, but I wouldn't then take that and say, well, then this is the first one we look at. I don't think that's it. I think it kind of organizes it a little bit. And I think what you talked about, and maybe we need to revisit it with regard, because if we were delegating them, if we thought it was like something the city manager, then we weren't going to rank that one. But
Right.
that doesn't mean they weren't important. It's just that we didn't think that was something that was going to be part of what we do. And if we want to tweak that to say, well, these we should and these we shouldn't, or at least get some kind of agreement as far as that goes, I think it may make the process
Right.
a little bit easier.
Well, that's where I think it may come down to discussion. I mean, we use this as a foundation, and you either give it weight, or you don't, and then we discuss it and see what comes up. One thing I found interesting was looking at your chart there and the rankings here, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're sequential. Go back to ranking or assigning a number to the number of commissioners that were interested in the topic. Look up on the screen there, you can see. Number 1 had 4. Number 2 had 5 commissioners. Number 3 had 4 commissioners, 3 commissioners, 3 commissioners, 2 commissioners, 2, and then down there. Interesting to me is that the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranked by Evan coincide with the first 5 doing my little method of the most number of commissioners. I don't know if there's any relationship there or not,
Right.
or whether it's just coincidental kind of a thing.
Right.
But if you could, let me make a couple statements and go to this ongoing thing, because again, the goal would be that if we can confirm what we think are ongoing, then we can remove them from our list of what we're looking at altogether. So in other words, we may be able to reduce the 88 action items to 68 if there's 20 items there. Are we okay with that? Taking a look at that? Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, and I want to thank Evan. I think you did a very good job prioritizing this and using the point system. And I did mark stuff as ongoing, but also prioritized it and said that there was some ownership of the city manager. Just for example, number 4 on the
Well, we're
list.
going to go through each one individually. so.
Okay. Then I'll hold off on that. But I think we also need to, when we look at one, for example, I'll just throw this an example. Second one is prepare a citywide stormwater management plan. So 5 of us chose that. Patrick didn't, but when you go down to consider amending city zoning ordinance to define impervious surface, and it goes to further about the importance of impervious surface. I didn't select that one as a priority because my expectation is that is going to be in a stormwater management plan.
Those
Or that recommendation. right.
interconnected type of things. Could
So
be.
to me, those can be combined almost.
Right.
And
Commissioner Legree?
to jump on with Ed, also, that would be a part of your climate action plan. And we could group, I went through here and looked at code. A number of code changes could be grouped together. And as I said, infrastructure could be grouped together. But
And I had
this
felt,
gives us a good idea.
I had felt the same way on, I think there were 4 different items that popped up about rental properties
Right.
and things that we should be doing, could be doing, whatever.
All done
And they're all
concurrently.
interconnected,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's do 2 more things today. Darn it, I promised to get you out by 7, didn't I? And
Mayor, did I understand you? You want to go through 88 items that already have some noted as ongoing?
Yes, and you'll see that
Okay.
I believe it's
Can
a
I just,
valid.
I just have one quick
Commissioner
question,
Bennett?
kind of the elephant in the room. So I don't see anything about Baltimore, Wilmington, or the lifeguard stand building.
Well,
here.
it's interesting because the old CDP
Had that in there, right?
had Wilmington Baltimore streetscape improvements.
Right.
The old CDP had something I was very interested in, and that was creating an architectural foundation for the commercial areas or something.
Right.
It's not in there anymore. Doesn't mean we can't add it back in, at some point for ourselves. It's just, again, it's just not part of the CDP.
Okay. All right.
I mean, we're not giving up on the Wilmington Baltimore, and if it were in there,
Right.
we would probably say it's an ongoing project.
It just
know,
seems
but-
to be an awful big project to kind of just ignore as part
Well,
of the CDP.
and
I mean,
I
$50
don't-
million, right? I mean,
And I don't think we are ignoring it based on, the
Yeah.
comment here. But the other one, the architectural, do you remember how it was worded, Patrick? Architectural,
Architectural review.
not the review manual or the board, it was an architectural style for the commercial areas.
Historic district, is that what you're?
No, it's not there. I'll look it up for you and let you know for
all
next
right,
time.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to derail you. I just.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Well, let's go over, we're doing good time-wise, so let's take a look at, I did want to remind us that when I introduced this last time, I gave us a little calendar. And really what this meeting was to try to firm up some of the action items so that we could send them to the assistant city manager so that he could do a quick budget item on it and bring it back to us at the next meeting so that we could firm up that that's indeed what we want. Because if they were going to cost another $20 million, obviously we would have to abort. But part of the timing of this was to try to expedite things so that we could give him, the city manager, the proposed priorities so that they could be in the next year's budget. And I'm rethinking that process, that maybe what we ought to just say is city manager, put in $30 million for CDP projects or 10 million or whatever. And we just live within that. so that that doesn't cause us to have to rush this, because you're creating your first budget when, in January, which is just around the corner.
Doing it now.
And we're not going to have, unless we firm up priorities at the January 9th workshop, we're not going to have anything. So I'm perplexed at how to do that, but if you all would give some thought to it, I'd appreciate it. So let's using Evan's sheet there, let's look at the ongoing business thing. Again, the goal would be, let's see if we can confirm what's ongoing, and we can we can yellow highlight it, so that if it's ongoing, that means we're removing it from our 88 list. Now, by example, the first item there, somebody checked it as ongoing, review and revise city land use codes and regulations. I don't recognize that as ongoing. So I think we need to address it. And
So who is the official person who says this is or is not ongoing?
just us commissioners, that's all.
Why wouldn't that be a department head, knowing what is really happening in your own department? I don't know whether this is ongoing. I have heard from a couple of people it's ongoing. I've heard from another person it's not ongoing. You just said it's not ongoing. Who is the arbiter of
Ongoing.
of ongoing? Thank you.
Well,
I mean, I don't mean to make this more difficult,
Oh, yeah.
trying to
but
get back to define what is kind of thing. In ongoing, I mean, we just revised codes here for outdoor dining. We've revised moving buildings, we revised demolition of buildings, those types, so that can be ongoing. I know that there's, theoretically in the hopper, we talk about impervious surface, we're going to talk about sign awnings, these types of things. So that's is ongoing, and that is coming from the department heads that deal with this all the time. So again, the only thing to me, and this is the frustrating part, the only thing that's ongoing about this is discussion. I don't know what we have actually done to accomplish these things.
For action item number 1.
1 through 10, if you want.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, but to have a department head or whomever come back to us and say, okay, this is what needs to be done. I don't know that it's up to our necessarily the ones to accomplish the actual work of it. It's just the staff or the users, if you will, are experiencing these frustrations or these properties. Our zoning map is 2010. It doesn't reflect a housing development on Jones Lane. It doesn't reflect a couple of changes that have taken place on other blocks in the city. And, there is no, that I'm aware of, a process in place to update that as it's done. We still have conflicts with the county thing. So again, it is, we need to get to an action step of who's going to be responsible for this and how it's going to be accomplished and how long is it going to take us and what's it going to cost.
I agree, but I still think that we could go through here and identify generally what's ongoing and what's not. Somebody said that's ongoing, and I don't believe it
Well,
is.
let me explain, and I'm the one that did it.
There we go.
I also, number 4, which is similar, it also talks about the city codes and ambiguous language. I marked 1 and 4 both ongoing, and part of the ownership is both the city manager and the mayor and commissioners. But my understanding is the city staff and city manager are constantly discussing what they find is ambiguous in the code. They're currently working with an outside consultant to identify what they think is ambiguous language. So, yeah, I think that's ongoing, but there's still an action item that we have to address.
We have to make.
So that was my rationale for how I marked that. Because I
Well, I
think
guess
it's
what I'm
both.
trying to do is look for new or unstarted things to start as our prioritization.
Well, then you can take my ongoing check away.
No, because number four, I believe it is ongoing. We've got these, we We haven't gotten to that step yet. We're waiting to schedule a meeting for it, likely early in the year, but that's where the 226 zoning their code things, and then there's 20 zoning code things. So I kind of say it started because I think once it gets momentum, then we'll continue to do that, so.
One
It's
I
just-
consider as being to elevate it. You know, I mean, either it hasn't started or it has started, but if it has started, does it need to be elevated? I mean, and I think both of those, like 1 and 4, we've always talked about having an outside concern come and revise the code, and that we've been talking about that for years, you know. But has that happened to the degree that we want it to, or feel that it should be? And I think it should. But so if we can add another dimension to this in terms of, you know, turning the heat up on certain things.
Right. Well, look at the example for number 3 there. Number 3 has to do with consider contracting with a professional traffic engineering firm. I put that ongoing. I guess one other person did too, because the city manager's already been directed to pursue this. And we will be having a meeting soonish to be able to receive Street and Transportation Committee recommendations, to put it in front of the commissioners so that we can see what commissioners want in terms of scope of that job. But in my mind, it's ongoing because it's been initiated.
But it has a start and stop, right, Mayor? I mean, that's how I looked at this. If we want to revise the zoning map, the map's revised and it's done. So there's a start and a finish, a start and a finish. So the traffic study is a start and a finish. Putting in a new crosswalk is a start and a finish. Building a lifeguard stand is a start and finish. But some of these other things about exploring this or cleaning the lakes, or that's ongoing, because there's no start and finish because it's ongoing. So I think some of these, we need to have a start and a finish to them. Otherwise, everything's ongoing, because you're constantly going to be updating maps. You're constantly going to be updating some of these zoning issues. But if there's adopting a new map is a start and a finish.
So how do you treat, there's an item in here about oceanfront commercial buildings be incorporated in the requirements for site plan review. I put that as ongoing because we've already directed the Planning Commission and tasked them with doing that. So to me, it's ongoing. Yeah, it's not finished, but it's ongoing.
But there will be a finish, right?
Oh, yeah.
So to me, that's not ongoing, because it's going to be done. There's going to be a finish to it.
Underway instead of being ongoing.
I'm having a hard time understanding that, but to me, it's,
Well, if you directed the Planning Commission to identify which are oceanfront,
Commercial
commercial
building.
properties, there's a start to that, and then there's a finish. We finished doing it. It's completed.
but why isn't your start the same as my ongoing?
Because then the whole thing's ongoing. And I think that's where Commissioner Czerniawski and some other people were talking
I
earlier.
think when you say something is ongoing, it's infinite. It will continue to go on. I think what, Mayor, you're
How about started?
in process.
How about started?
I think in process is really what you
In
what you mean.
I'd be happy with that. It is started or in progress. So really, is it more of a nomenclature?
Correct, that there's a start and finish to it.
I mean, ultimately, are we not going to be broadening this to specify the expected end date of it or things like that? You know, like when's it going to be completed or so forth and so on. Some of these things you may be able to sort of answer early on, and others not so much.
Well, that's where, again, you go back to number 1, and that's a challenge, because, yeah, we did, because it's so broad. Review and revise land use codes. You know, it'd be easier if we said land use code specific to site plan review or something, you know, but.
Well, is that not reflective of the report that we got from E-Code, the report? So that report addresses it by chapter. So if we were to decide to say, staff, we're going to look at chapter 1, and for 30 days, you know, from workshop, we're getting a workshop, and make a proposal at the next regular meeting of changes to be done. and the next month we do chapter 2, and the next month chapter 3, or something of that nature, so that it is a start and a finish date, there's in progress, that, again, all of these, I think the reason a lot of these come to the top 10 is we've been talking about them for decades, and there's been no action taken in that regard, other than discussing, we need to do this, we have to do that, and what comes up is those, if you will, low-hanging fruit of moving buildings, or, it took this issue with the Sands Hotel to bring the demolition issue up front to the highest boil. So if this is what's laid out over the next 10 years, if we can break it down into manageable assignments and who is responsible, whether it be staff, whether it be commission, whether it be planning commission, whether it be Board of Adjustments, whomever, department heads, I think it is a manageable task as opposed to just, everything coming in one big pile and do it and nothing gets done. I mean, so just choosing out here, it happened to be my number one, so I'll choose that. But, review and adopt an official, updated official zoning map. So I turn to Evan. In your mind, how would that take place and whose responsibility would that fall to?
Official updated zoning map, is that what you said?
Yes.
We've already tasked Glenn with looking into that, but.
So what does looking into it mean? Do we have a date of 30 days, or we'll get a report back in 60 days? And I'm just curious as to attaching some responsibilities to this.
Well, I think one of the things we wanted, well, you can answer, what you think the best time frame is, considering we have 3 rezoning requests in front of us, or change in zoning designation. I think it ought to coordinate. As soon as we're done with that, then let's do this and update it. And because it's not just that one, and it's integrates with future land use map and stuff like that. Let Glenn speak, and then I'll come to you.
Right, I mean, there's a couple things that have to happen with that. One is we have to identify the individual who's actually going to do the map. I'm not sure if, the map that we currently have was done by Dave Henderson in 2010, and he had the ability to actually do the map. I think our IT department has the capability to revise the map. It's going to take some time to identify all the changes that need made to it. This goes all the way back to, for example, Oak Grove Motor Court. That subdivision is not identified on the map. There's a number of things. We want to make sure that we identify everything that actually needs to be revised on the map. Then make sure that we have the in-house capability to revise the map. Then you, as the commissioners, will have to review it and certify that it is the new zoning map. There will be some coordination with the Office of State Planning coordination to make sure that we have the proper map to them. So there's a couple of steps in that process, but the first thing I think is getting through. You have 3 rezoning requests that have come in, and until we know what the decision is on them, because they might require another change to the map, I don't think we should get too far down the process of revising the map until whatever rezoning applications are before you are finally decided.
But the early questions that you just posed, do we have capability of in-house? Who's responsible for that? Those can be answered now.
Right, that's stuff that the mayor's tasked me with looking into already. Which
Ongoing.
Right.
Or in progress.
Right.
With no due date.
Well, come back to this ongoing concept. I understand, Tim, better what you're saying now, in progress or started kind of a thing. But I think there are also perhaps some ongoing things, such as good maintenance of the boardwalk and continuing to lobby for, to the state, feds and locally for funds for beach nourishment. To me, that's an ongoing, that's 24/7 forever. So there are kind of different categories there, I think. Go ahead.
One of the struggles I had, and I'm by no means a zoning expert, but when I look at the 10 of these items, number 1, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7 all came under the same chapter. And to me, they should just be, and this is where I think in watching the Planning Commission meeting online is where some of the discussion they had was in terms of their discomfort. To me, that's all a zoning code. That's all zoning code issues, and they should almost all be collapsed. Because I think we all agree that we need to update and fix our codes, right? And if you look at 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the 10, to me, they all are different ways of saying kind of the same things in some different ways. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they could be grouped together, as we were talking a minute ago, can be grouped together. It'd be also nice to know if, have a status report. I'm not aware of how much outside help we're getting on the code, but I know that's going on. And just how much work are we doing on this right now? And indeed, that's an ongoing status report. But it would help me a lot just for informational purposes, just to know what's going on.
Right, we can work on that. If you notice the Planning Commission's ranking sheet, I believe they categorized everything.
Yeah, she did.
You know, they, by, I can't remember the categories, but anything interconnected, they tried to put together. So maybe that's a better program here, I don't know.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems I had with it, and I briefly called Evan at the beginning of this, was the way this was organized in the first place via the CDP is by chapter. And then this exercise takes all the action items, puts them together and says rank 10, rank 1 to 10. So to me, inherent in that translation is a flaw. Because if the source document is organized by chapter and the chapters have some interrelation to one another as well, then when you put them all in the same group to make them an equivalent to one another, it seems to fly in the face of how the source document was put together to begin with. Does that make any sense? I got 2 heads going yes, and the rest, nobody?
Well, no, and then the Planning Commission went and just used Chapter 4 in their rankings, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they have an addendum sheet identifying notes for the rest of the chapters. They had 3
Yes.
support documents, so go to that 3rd support document. But they started out initially, well, yeah, their ranking was just Chapter 4.
Right.
They didn't, they got the word to include the others, but they didn't go back and do it, so.
It just seems odd to me, and I'll use an example that I'm involved in right here, is in the first 10 that are shaded in green, there's only one that pops up from Chapter 3. And it seeks to improve our two-way communication between city residents, businesses, and visitors. Only 2 commissioners voted for that.
It's ongoing.
And it also says it's ongoing. Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
But I think that's okay that we have more heavily prioritized items in zoning and building code than other areas. I
don't disagree. But why is communications rising to the top 10 with only 2 commissioners believing it's, because you can look at the rest of the sheet, and there are other issues where 4 commissioners have said it's in their top 10, and it didn't rise to the top green shaded ones. Like if you look at the third one from the bottom.
That's the value in a point-based system. You marked it as your top priority, so it has more weight.
Yeah, but I'm only 1 commissioner. I got 10 points for doing that.
And that's okay.
Is it?
I think so. I mean, that's how a point-based system ranking works.
And so just carry it through with me one more step. That if I was saying, okay, communications for me rose to the top, but the choice could have been the impervious surface. Out of those 2, I would say impervious surfaces because of stormwater management are more important.
But you also got, how many commissioners went for impervious?
4.
Right.
But it didn't rise
And
to the
it-
top
and it's
10.
down here.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Because I think we did what Jay mentioned, is we thought impervious was part of the stormwater management.
That's why I ranked for the stormwater management plan high and did not rank
impervious.
surface, because my expectation is, in a stormwater management plan, it is going to include recommendations on impervious surfaces.
Well, that's what I'm told it's going to do.
But the way the system has worked is that the hot potato gets the attention. So that's why I said impervious surface, because you can cut to the chase. Impervious surface is going to have a direct impact. By the time this city writes a citywide stormwater management plan, it's going to be a while. I mean, it's like moving a building. It's like demolition of a building. That's how the system has been functioning. We put out the fires. We're not planning in advance. That's what this document is helping us to do, to plan in advance for that matter, as opposed to putting out the fires.
I think if we had a show of hands of who's in support of impervious, the impervious surface issue, we'd all be like that. The issue is we only had 10 choices. We should have ranked them 1 to 100. That would have made it even worse. I think we're trying to use this thing as a guide.
Right.
And it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be complicated in the beginning, but I think we can arrive at, hopefully, with hopefully not months of discussion, maybe 1 or 2 months of discussion, to center on the things that we think that need to be brought to more attention, direct certain things to people who we're going to assign to do them, because then they'll be done, and so forth and so on. It's not like a list that you check boxes off. Some you're going to be able to check boxes off, and some you're not. But you're still going to attend to the ones that are ongoing, and you're going to revisit them, and maybe there will be new things that will arise that you will be able to address them better in the future than now, or whatever. I mean, parking is always going to be on there. It's always going to be there. Are we going to just continue to study it and study it and study it and study it? What can we do? There may be things we can do, but it's always going to be there. So. And I think it's like being able to elevate and graduate. The things that we can do, we'll do, and the things that we strive to do, we will strive to do.
It's Patrick Commissioner Gossett just made a good point, and it just reminds me of the difference in philosophy. That one impervious is a hot potato, and it's something we can fix right away. Just like if you go down to the second page. Commissioner Gossett and Mayor Mills ranked undertake a climate change, sea level rise, vulnerability assessment, whatever. That was a priority for me too, but that and 2 other environmental things that were priorities fell under a climate action plan. So because a climate action plan was a catch-all, that's the one that I ranked.
Right. So you scored that one. Yeah. You didn't score the other one, but it doesn't mean you're not interested in that thing.
When I'm looking at several things that were interrelated that I thought were priorities, I chose the one that I thought was a catch-all for all of them, not necessarily what I think we could do the quickest.
So just follow that along in the sense the climate action plan, and then under here, there may be other items that will directly affect that. So those are the, if you will, low-hanging fruit that we could perhaps address and make some, 3 or 6 months take us to make these changes. But if we organize it in that manner, that may be it. The other thing that is, to me, is not apparent in here, and if it is, help me find it, is staff capacity. We're talking about all of this stuff to be done, but you talk with a number of the employees, and of course everybody, I guess, is going to say, well, I'm as busy as I can be. My plate's full, this kind of stuff. But are we then going to put additional needs or additional work in this process to get this stuff done? And it's just staff capacity.
Well, that's to be evaluated by the city manager.
Who isn't here yet, by the way, to help to add into this conversation.
He's not?
Where is
I'm
he,
sure he's
Stan?
watching.
All right, Mr. Mayor, move us forward here. What's the next step?
Maybe he is watching. Let's hope he's not.
Screaming in his computer right now.
Well, I'd like you all to articulate the next step. For me, I look at modifying this chart perhaps to include in progress / start to identify which ones may have already started. I also look at noting some for me that are ongoing, such as the beach category. I think there could be a column put in there for timeline. If you have started something, what is your timeline and your expectation for an end date?
Yeah, we need
So I don't know, that interests me, but where do you all want to go with this?
I think all of that makes sense. I also think we should add a category if it has a budget impact. Because that's something that we really need on our radar.
Little column for put a dollar sign there if it's going to take some financing. Do you want to categorize these or lump together all the interconnected action items the best we can?
Yes.
And then maybe they become one mega action item.
Yes.
Anybody? Input?
Well, I'm just
If I
wondering,
ask-
should we establish like a working group? Maybe to kind of give it, you want to do that?
I'd
Within ourselves?
do it quicker. No.
Okay.
No.
But off the top of your head, Mayor, if I asked you what your three priorities would be for 2023, what would you say?
Well, actually, one of them was historic preservation, which didn't get on here. And the reason why, and there's a couple interconnected things there, but reason why is because I'm fully convinced that if we don't address it in the next year or two, that for the next CDP, there will be no point in having historic preservation on there because we will be beyond that point. So that's one of them. The other ones are the climate action things, and I can't remember. I actually made my own column for small things. What's that phrase? Easy to grab.
Low-hanging fruit?
Huh?
Low-hanging fruit?
Low-hanging fruit. There you go. That I have some of these things like for the official zoning map that we just talked about. Just do it. And we have started that, as you hear. But there are other things too that I think we just put in there that let's just do it.
But what's the barrier on this one? We're coming right back to this, the zoning map. What's the barrier to finishing it? Okay, it needs to be finished by February 1st.
Well, Glenn just mentioned that we've got some rezoning requests there, and we want to hear those and act on them so that if they indeed are rezoned, then they could be included in the update of the zoning map.
Okay, so.
And I've charged him with being ready, starting the research now, so that he and Evan can work together so that when we are done with the change in zoning actions, then within a reasonable amount of time afterwards, we can act on it and get that off our plate.
Is it unrealistic to think that we're going to have a final map? I mean, isn't it a living map? It's always going to change, isn't it?
It's not a living map. I mean, to go through a full zoning map change it's quite a process. I mean, that's why
Right.
Oak Grove Motor Court and several other things still aren't shown on the zoning map.
Okay, I mean, at some point you got to do it.
Right, it has not changed since 2010, not a single piece of it.
Right.
Yeah, so this one's going to take some time to figure out what are all those actions that have happened since 2010. Partitionings, every partitioning that's happened is not shown on that current map. So all of those things have to be identified. Then somebody technologically savvy has to actually create the map. It's going to have to come to you all probably in several meetings to make sure that you confirm that all the changes we've made are what you want your map to show. And at some point you'll get to a vote.
But is that going to include all the unambiguous language and all the other issues that go with that?
No.
So that's the problem.
Strictly a map.
That's why, right.
So a part of that process that needs to happen is then since January 1st of 2010, the city secretary or whomever has to produce a comprehensive list of all partitionings that have been approved in the last 13 years, along with any other official accession or mergers, unmergers, that whole ball of wax. So those are issues that have to be managed, okay? So again, I come back to the question, does that come to city manager or assistant city manager to set up that process of, okay, here are the 10 steps required to get to February 1st, 2024, to get the map done, and how do we accomplish that, and who's responsible for that, and what is it going to cost us? Those are the kind of things that need to come out of this plan, the action steps of it. And I'm we can go through and try to reprioritize and whatever, but if you're looking for low-hanging fruit, this is a map that reflects the changes of our community over the last 12 years that have not been reflected. And, in the aspect of, God, how many years ago I was on the Planning Commission, those types of things of mergers and
Changes in zone? I mean, there's probably been a couple changes in zone.
quite a few changes in zoning.
Well, and again, based on this, he's been directed to work together to start this.
So
your
could we then-
reiteration is very helpful, but we're starting something.
So would it be possible to say that this could be accomplished by date? I mean, once you go back and do your research and all of this information.
I mean, maybe, but I thought part of the process that you're struggling through right now is you're trying to figure out what, within the CDP, there are a number of action items. You're trying to figure out, you have limited resources, right? I'm limited, Evan's time is limited. So I think this process is you're figuring out which of those items do you definitely want to get moving on as a matter of prioritization. Because if that's your number one, then we're going to go full bore on it. If it's your number 7, there's probably things that we have to do 1 through 6 that are going to take our time. And I won't be able to give you a date as to when we think we'll be able to get that accomplished until you've prioritized what you want us working on. I know it's a difficult task, but that's just the reality of it. Until it's prioritized, you're going to have a hard time pushing your resources where you want them to be.
I'm not sure I agree with you 100% on that. Come back to this zoning thing. I've tasked you with working with Evan, and the deadline is to be ready when those 3 change of zoning designation requests are done. I want to be able to know right then what the next steps are to as quickly as possible redo the zoning map to reflect, especially if there are any changes made.
But I guess my point is, if the Board of Commissioners today says, or whenever, says that's not number 1, something else is number 1, then I guarantee you'll say, pull back a little bit and get this thing done first, because the Board of Commissioners. And
that's why I'm saying I will fight for the just do it list.
Right.
That, if the commissioners don't, imagine all the commissioners are going to say updating the official zoning map is a priority, even if it's not reflected necessarily in here, as a top thing, but.
And are there still not, if I remember, was the ownership of the canal land ever resolved with Lewis? Kind of filing a quick claim
With
deed?
Henlopen Acres.
Henlopen Acres, rather, I'm sorry.
That's underway too.
Both planet.
It's America, we all got to own it.
Pakistan and India.
That's it. So again, those are the issues that it's ongoing. We need to stop some of this, please.
It is ongoing.
I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but that is, when you talk about low-hanging fruit, if we don't have specific priorities, numbers 1 through 10, a start date, a check-in date, an end date, and who's responsible, who's championing this to get it accomplished.
Well, and I think we know that, so we can start moving forward. That action item number 6, or priority 6, update the official zoning map. It's in progress. Glenn has ownership of it, and we'll get an update after the next 3, in the next month or 2, when we make those decisions on the requests, and after that time, we'll get an update from Glenn on where we stand.
But I thought I heard there's a middle part of catching up on 12 or 13 years of data that hasn't necessarily made its way from one spot to another in order to be able to do what needs to be done.
And that's what
That's
Glenn
part of the
is, that's
task.
what he's
I
working
mean,
on
that's part of
now.
the task, yes, absolutely.
And is there staff capacity to do that? You can't answer that now, but I mean, you got to have a list to start from.
That's the purview of the city manager. Not yet, yeah, in a minute. Anybody else? I don't know that we have clear direction, we got some direction. Would you like to say something, Suzanne? Identify yourself and your relationship to the city, please.
Suzanne Good, full-time resident, 1 Grove Street. I sympathize with all of you because it seems as though the categories were not mutually exclusive. So yeah, I mean, it seems like that there might be, and it might be in everybody's interest to redefine the categories. And I will make it easy for all of you, but I don't know that you'll go along with this. I would like to eliminate one category, which has to do with this suggestion that we need to hire a parking and traffic consultant. Just let me take you back to early 2022 when we made minor modifications to parking in the city with the promise that in the fall of 2022, we would do a total reworking ahead of summer of 2023. And then I learned, I think about 2 months ago, that instead we're gearing up to hire yet another consultant. I think anyone who lives here full-time as I do and has any background in congestion pricing, which is a thing all over the world now, could come up with a reasonable plan. Instead, we're gonna give up on summer 2023 in potentially having the permits be necessary until 10 p.m. to be aligned with the meters. So I would mark that right off the CDP in the sense that, I think you do have a lot on your plate and you don't need to keep reinventing the wheel with the parking issue, which, there are lots of people, including those who previously served on the parking commission, who have a lot of knowledge of that. So I would just throw it out there that we could maybe start taking, removing some of these things if we could deal with them more expediently. And I don't know if any of you are willing to give me some feedback as to why we've gone a different route than that we were promised in early 2022. On the video, that was going to be the sort of strategy to get that we didn't have enough time to get the brochures ready in March, and there were various reasons cited for why we were too close to May 2022 to put this into effect. But what was supposed to happen, I assume, in September or October of this year never came to fruition because we threw out this idea of yet another consultant. And in my comments later, I hope we get to that, that have to do with another issue. I think in general, the hiring of consultants when we could do things in-house might be best avoided. Thank you.
Thank you. Understand, Suzanne, that, the CDP is the CDP. It's got the 88 action items in there. We can't remove any of them. We can certainly not prioritize them or put them at the bottom of the list, but, we can't manipulate it otherwise. Is there any other members of the public that would like to address the CDP? All righty, well, we'll continue this discussion. If anybody's got some great ideas, then send them forward to Evan and/or myself. And otherwise, we'll bring this up again at our January 9th, Monday workshop, 9
So
a.m.
what would you like us to do or have ready for the workshop?
Well, I think, I'm not sure. I think right now, one of the things that we'll do is make sure that you review the Planning Commission ranking and sheet. I'll see if Susan can come attend or not to answer any questions you might have. At that point, prior to that meeting, you will be receiving, won't he, the city manager's ranking or notes or something right there. And then I'll try to work with Evan on reformatting some of this. So as far as you all go, it's really Well, you've already ranked them, so I don't know what more I can say, you know?
But, so you and/or the city manager will, before the next meeting, modify the spreadsheet to include whether it's in process, any timeframes, who's in charge, all of that information will be added to the spreadsheet?
I think what I'd like to do is for the next meeting, go through maybe top 10 or top 15 and identify realistic time frame. Some of these items, including stormwater management plan, zoning map, we've said are in progress, but we have already discussed internally a timeline for those. Stormwater management plan, FY23, you'll see that coming in the budget discussions. So I think I would like to get together with some staff, try and identify a realistic time frame for maybe the top. I'm ready to go as far as the top 15, just to be able to give you guys some flexibility to look at, you know, if some of those top 10 are not really a priority or may group with some of the items lower down or further down, give you a little bit of flexibility. So I want to look at timeline. I also want to look at possibly budget impact, and I think that may be, you know, some additional information for your consideration. And certainly I'm open to any other feedback that you have between now and then.
About grouping some of these things together.
That I have some, I think some of the commissioners have already identified items that they think would be grouped with other action items. I don't want to group items that I think may be related because you all may disagree. So I would think if the commissioners have certain items after looking back through this and going through this process, if you have items that you think should be grouped together, by all means, email them to me and I will try and consolidate those as much as possible, but I don't want to try and do that
That might be your
myself.
homework right there, you know, group together things that you think are like-minded. And, all right, any other questions? I thought this was a good conversation. I was hoping to get a little farther, but, you know, a lot of questions arose from while we were talking, so I appreciate everybody's input on this. Anything else? And we're going to go on to the next item of business, which is commissioner announcements and comments. We've already talked about the LRCIA dissolving. I just would like to mention a thank you about the holiday lights and displays. If the city manager would pass on behalf of the mayor and commissioners how wonderful they are for the holiday tree out there and everything else. It's just spectacular. You know, we had the Sussex County Association of Town dinner, was it a week or two ago? And one of the delights and joys is talking with my colleagues there that usually drive into town the full length of Rehoboth Avenue, go around the holiday tree, the bandstand, and come out. And that's one of their highlights for the season. So thank them for doing all that. Any other commissioner announcements or comments?
Mayor, if I could
go ahead.
just
Yeah.
say one thing. So I just want to say that this is my last public meeting as interim city manager. So I really want to thank mayor, commissioners, members of the public for your trust and faith in me in these last 8 months. I also, most importantly, want to thank our admirable staff for all the work that they do every single day. We have such an incredibly devoted team here, and since I started 5 years ago, I've received nothing but support, certainly from the commissioners and from the public and from our staff as well. So recently, you know, I reflected on photos of me as a kid on the avenue, eating ice cream on a bench on Rehoboth Avenue, and standing on the boardwalk in front of Ryan's mini golf. So it's really rewarding kind of knowing that I've come full circle from visitor to now public servant for our wonderful, wonderful community. So I just want to thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
If there's no other comments, I would like to review future meeting dates. Monday, January 9th, 9 a.m. is our workshop meeting. And Friday, January 20th is our budget meeting at 9 a.m., budget meeting number 1. And then also Friday, January 20th is our regular meeting starting at 2:00 p.m. That's all I've got. This meeting is adjourned at, somebody. Whew, I'm glad you held me back here. Citizen comment. We have members of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association here that have been very patient. Cliff, I did see you snooze once during the meeting, but that's all right. So if you would, Pam, identify yourself and your other members at the appropriate time, then go for it, please.
Thank you. I'm Pam Baker. I'm the new president of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association. I'm a part-time resident of Rehoboth Beach, so, and we'll go forward as we get there. So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, hope I don't bore you to death at the end of the agenda, but we want to thank you for hearing us today. Members of the board of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association are here to point out some issues that our members have identified for us, and we ourselves have noted that sort of what they fall under the category that we say there's lack of code enforcement on the part of the city. The subjects we raised probably won't be a big surprise to most of you. And our purpose in raising these issues is to call needed attention to them and to offer our assistance, and it's our members' assistance in finding workable solutions for them. Since I'm on my feet, they gave me the first issue, and that's noise. And I can make a lot of it, but what we're really talking about here is the fact that because we're such a vibrant little city, this can lead to unwanted noise, which, as the city code explains, a noise disturbs, injures, endangers the comfort, the repose, the health, the peace, and the safety of others. So, breaking it down, there are 3 categories that your city code has identified as noise: residential, commercial, and the all-encompassing one of construction, which hits both residential and commercial. So, per the code, the city manager is empowered to assess financial penalties and to revoke a rental permit for properties guilty of chronic noise violations. So how does the city manager keep track of chronic violators? How many times has the city manager met with a property owner in the past years to discuss chronic noise violations? And based on what our membership says, we believe 0 to both of these questions. City personnel are also responsible for assuring noise levels in commercial districts remain within the code limits. When was the last time noise levels were monitored? When was the last time a business was fined or even warned in writing for a noise violation? The code also limits the hours and days for construction to minimize, I've been here too long, noise disturbances. However, builders regularly ignored those limitations because, like other noise violations, there appears to be virtually no consequences for when they come and go. Ultimately, noise issues boil down to fairness. Rental and commercial property owners, property managers, and construction owners who cause or allow noise violations to occur are financially profiting at the expense of others' loss of peace, enjoyment, tranquility, and many times sleep. We ask that you and the new city manager either enforce the codes that we have as it is written, as they are written, or change them to something that can be enforced. So I'm going to turn it over to Cliff for the next topic. I think he's the trash man.
Thank you, Pam.
She says that with great love. Cliff Hilderly, I'm on the board of directors of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association. So we recognize that trash and recycling are very delicate subjects and that the city code has clear regulations concerning the days, times, and locations for the placement of trash, yard waste, and recycling containers for pickup. Unfortunately, we see too many cases where visitors or non-resident property owners ignore these regulations with impunity. It's all too common we see weekend visitors put yard waste recycling and trash containers out Sunday night, and those containers stay on the street for a week or more, there appears to be little or no code enforcement in these cases. Moreover, too many people in the summer place receptacles in ways that make it more difficult and more expensive for the taxpayers. For example, receptacles may be left on the sidewalk or in the front yard. They may be placed behind parked cars. Even those receptacles that are properly placed on the street are often facing backwards. Finally, we've also noted that businesses that keep trash in overflowing receptacles in close proximity to food establishments and public sidewalks for weeks or months. When was the last time anyone was warned or fined for chronically violating these regulations? We ask that consideration be given to additional enforcement of regulations concerning both residential and commercial trash, yard waste, and recycling pickup and storage. The aim of this request is to encourage everyone's cooperation in keeping the city attractive, clean, and safe while minimizing unnecessary costs.
Very good.
Doug?
Thank you, Cliff.
Hi, I'm Bob Lawrence. I'm also on the Board of Directors and part-time resident. And I'd like to talk to you about code enforcement in terms of motor scooters and skateboards. I mean, the city code, as we all know, prohibits the use of electric skateboards and motor scooters, or otherwise motorized scooters, not the type that you license and have a license plate. But the use of motorized scooters and skateboards has been increasing quite a bit. And some of these vehicles can go up to 20 miles an hour. And what we find that the cost of these is much less than the cost of an e-bike, so that they've become much more prolific in their use, although we'll find that e-bikes start becoming a problem as well. We are already seeing people riding electric scooters up and down the highways in the city and on Route 1. And this can be problematic. We see these skateboards and scooters on our sidewalks and on the boardwalk, sometimes going quite fast. We don't have specific numbers of violations to report, but suggest that we increase the enforcement in the prohibition on the motorized scooters and skateboards as needed and as warranted. This, like some of the other things that have been brought up, is once again a condition where we have the codes, we aren't enforcing them. We should ask ourselves, if we have the codes, should we either enforce them or change them? John?
Thank you, Bob.
Good afternoon, John Dewey, Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association board member and resident on Scarborough Avenue. Sidewalks are a critical part of the city's infrastructure. However, it seems there is little being done to keep our sidewalks safe and freely usable. I want to point out 3 examples where code enforcement appears to be lacking: sidewalk repair, sidewalk obstruction, and parking on sidewalks. With the exception of Rehoboth Avenue and a few areas in the commercial district, it is nearly impossible to find a single block which does not have some part of the sidewalk that is not broken, damaged, or heaved by tree roots. The hazards and difficulties of traversing broken and uneven sidewalks encourages people to make the equally hazardous choice of walking or running in the street. We would like to see increased enforcement of the code requiring homeowners to maintain their sidewalks, as well as enforcement of pedestrians using the sidewalks. Next, the code is clear that no one shall place any type of obstructions on sidewalks. We acknowledge that sidewalk dining areas and Rehoboth in Bloom planters appear well-managed to minimize any challenges to pedestrian passage. However, beyond these two cases, this regulation appears to be totally ignored in the commercial district, with various businesses carpeting the sidewalk or placing large planters and other obstructions in front of their establishments, thereby significantly reducing the walking area for pedestrians. Here again, this can encourage or even require people to use the street. In some places, there may not even be sufficient space for wheelchairs or large strollers. Finally, it appears that cars parked across sidewalks are rarely ticketed or towed, even when parked overnight. There has been an observable increase in the numbers of persons using wheelchairs and other mobility equipment on sidewalks in both the commercial and residential districts. This is all to the good, as the city has taken clear steps to become both more welcoming and accommodating to persons with mobility support needs. As with broken sidewalks, vehicles, including motorcycles, scooters, and cars, routinely block residential sidewalks, forcing persons using wheelchairs and mobility support into the street. This is another sidewalk safety issue that needs additional enforcement. So in closing, we have pointed out a number of areas where code enforcement seems to be lacking. However, we would like to make a related point. We are of the opinion that enforcement action is too rarely taken unless a citizen complains. And this is concerning, since many people would rather tolerate or ignore code violations than make a formal complaint. This, unfortunately, can lead to the false impression that there are no violations. The end result is that numerous provisions of the city code are widely ignored, since there are no real or perceived consequences even for chronic violators. We're not talking about major crimes, but basic issues of safety and the ability of people to peacefully enjoy life in Rehoboth Beach. As we said at the beginning, our purpose here is to call attention to an issue our membership has identified, which is questionable code enforcement. Please feel free to call us, either as the Rehoboth Board or with the help of our membership, to support efforts intended to address these code enforcement issues. And we'd like to thank you all for your time and attention while we're here today. Thanks again.
Thank you, John, Pam, Cliff, and Bob. Thank you for your perseverance staying through the whole meeting. We appreciate it. Look, we're all ears. We hear you. I indicated to Pam and Cliff ahead of time that unfortunately we can't respond because it's not on the agenda, but I guarantee you we've heard it up here. Almost wish I had suggested to wait for the next city manager to come on board, but I will be asking him and Evan to review this tape. And I think, Cliff, you said you had something in writing, so maybe that's the way to. So that would be great, because they're all valid concerns and questions that I think probably each one of us up here has had to deal with on a personal basis. I do wish when you had talked about sidewalks, John, that you had mentioned the need for filling in discontiguous sidewalks, because that's one of my priorities on the CDP. You know, I'd like to get those fixed in, but anyhow, I want to thank you very much, and we will be in touch. Okay? Thank you. Any other members of the public during citizen comment? You have something short? Go ahead. Short.
As short as the homeowners, I suppose. But
Well, each one of them was less than 3 minutes. So.
Okay. Really? Okay. Well, Suzanne Good, once again, 1 Grove Street. I know that Commissioner Legree is giving you an update on the Stormwater Task Force, but I wanted an opportunity, in addition to the letter I believe I emailed to you about 3 weeks ago, just to give you some of my thoughts before you go into the budget sessions and before you make decisions on this. For background, it would appear that we've contracted with this ACOM for almost the past 3 years, and there's sort of a fixed cost to that, and that will come to an end once they provide a written report, presumably before this February 14th meeting. But I'm very concerned because I am a member of the task force. I am the only one, as of now, to question in any major way whether the implementation costs are going to be high enough that they may make, they mean it makes more sense to raise this revenue through other means, because we may need to engage the services of this consultant in perpetuity because of a lot of the aspects of implementation. And there are a lot of problems in many municipalities. You, for instance, have not held a town hall yet to run this by the public. We've gotten almost no feedback from the public, except one gentleman who questioned whether we even need to spend almost $2 million a year on the infrastructure. I personally have confidence in the consultants whom we've already hired, who scoped out and simply the pipes aren't of the proportions that we need for all the new developments since like the 1960s or 70s. So I'd just like all of you to consider, I know Commissioner Gossett mentioned that city staff is already short of, there aren't infinite resources. So are we going to need a half-time person to administrate this who works for City Hall? Are we going to need to continue to pay money once this $70,000 is dispersed to the consultant? Are we going to continue to have to spend several, I don't know, 20, 30,000 a year for this consultant? They seem very able, but they've gotten a lot of pushback. In Staunton, Virginia, for instance, citizenry voted down the impact fee altogether. So all those consulting fees were for naught. So I hope you'll consider, I have raised lots of other means of raising this revenue, which we do need, probably $2 million a year for the next 10 to 15 years, each and every year, almost $2 million a year. And I had perfect attendance for the first 6 months of this task force. Then I had personal reasons to have to travel. So I unfortunately was unable to make it to the most recent 2 meetings. But I just thought I wanted to present an overview of, I think, some of the inherent problems with this impact fee. And I know that the members of the public, I don't know, they're busy with other things. They are totally unaware of what's happening with this, in my opinion. So you are inevitably going to have a lot of pushback, I think. And if you were to implement this, I'm very worried because the water rates, as all of you know, we have probably the most regressive water rates of any rate structure possible. And the way the committee is going, we're going to these same sort of flat rates with no distinction between commercial rates and residential rates, and no tier structure, so people with like a massive 20,000 square foot property pay proportionally more. So I just don't think it's going to go down very well with the public to continue to have a basically non-progressive way of taxing the citizenry. So I just wanted to put all that out there. I want to thank Jay. He's done a great job attempting to sort of shepherd us through it. And I look forward to the February 14th meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak? If not, then we'll adjourn this meeting at 5:03 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Productive meeting.